Welcome to Potter Nexus. What if Harry Potter never went to the Dursleys? What if, instead of a cupboard under the stairs, he was raised in the deepest, most forbidden place in the wizarding world, the Department of Mysteries? Surrounded by time chambers, prophecy flames, the veil of death, and secrets even Dumbledore feared. Harry didn't learn spells first. He learned truths. This is the story of a boy raised not to survive, but to understand reality itself. Chapter 1. The Veil's Firstborn. The air in the Department of Mysteries didn't just sit, it thrummed. It was a heavy, pressurized silence that tasted like copper and old memories. Deep within the bowels of the Ministry of Magic, past the spinning doors and the brains floating in green brine, lived the Unspeakable's greatest secret. He wasn't a prophecy, and he wasn't a weapon, not yet. He was just a boy named Harry, sitting cross-legged on the cold stone floor of the death chamber, staring at the veil. The veil fluttered in a non-existent breeze, its tattered edges whispering in a language only the dead and the lonely understood. Harry, at age 11, was both. "You're doing it again, kid." Saul Croaker stepped out of the shadows, his gray robes blending into the gloom. He didn't look like a wizard, he looked like a man who had seen the heat death of the universe and found it mildly irritating. He tossed a heavy, leather-bound book onto the floor next to Harry. The thud echoed like a gunshot. "Staring into the hole in the world won't bring him back," Croaker said, his voice a gravelly rasp. "And it sure as hell won't help you finish your occlumency drills. Get your head out of the clouds before the shadows start eating your lunch." Harry didn't blink. His emerald eyes, unnaturally bright against the pallor of his skin, remained fixed on the archway. "They aren't just shadows, Saul. They're echoes. They're screaming, but they're doing it in slow motion. It's like a song that never hits the chorus." He finally looked up, and even Croaker, a man who had dissected the fabric of time, felt a chill. There was no innocence in those eyes. There was only a terrifying, quiet calculation. "American slang, Saul, really?" Harry asked, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. "You've been reading those smuggled no-mage pulps again. Eating my lunch. That's weak, even for a guy who lives in a basement." "Watch your mouth, brat," Croaker grunted, though there was no real heat in it. "I'm the only one keeping the minister from turning you into a lab rat. Now, get up, we're moving to the time room. You need to learn how to kill a man in the 3 seconds before he decides to pull his wand. If you're gonna be the savior of the wizarding world, you might as well be a lethal one." Harry stood, his movements fluid and eerily silent. He wore a simple black tactical tunic, devoid of any house colors. He was a creature of the department, forged in the dark, fed on forbidden lore, and raised by men who didn't believe in morality, only results. The walk through the ministry was a blur of shifting corridors. The unspeakables moved like ghosts around them. No one spoke, no one waved. This was a place of absolute coldness. "The prophecy says I'm the one to finish him," Harry said, his voice echoing in the hall of prophecy as they passed the shimmering glass orbs. "But the prophecy is a load of garbage, isn't it? It's just a probability, a math equation with too many variables." "Everything's an equation, Harry," Croaker replied, stopping in front of a massive bell jar where a hummingbird was trapped in a perpetual loop of birth and death. "The Dark Lord, he's just a rounding error that got out of hand. You're the correction. You aren't being raised to play Quidditch or make friends. You're being raised to be the scalpel that cuts out the cancer." Harry reached out, his hand hovering inches from the glass jar. He could feel the chronal energy humming against his fingertips, a jagged, electric vibration. "The Unspeakables call me, Subject 7. The No Mace would call me a ghost. What does Dumbledore call me?" Croaker spat on the floor. "The headmaster calls you a tragedy. He thinks we're corrupting your soul. He wants you in a red and gold scarf, learning how to turn a pincushion into a hedgehog. He wants you to have a childhood. But Dumbledore is an old man, clinging to a world that died the night your parents did." Harry turned, his gaze sharpening. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "My soul isn't corrupted, Saul. It's just optimized. I don't feel the need for hedgehogs. I feel the need for gravity. For the way a curse feels when it tears through the atmosphere. I want to know why the veil calls my name. Because you're a freak of nature, kid," a new voice boomed. Bode walked in, carrying a tray of vials filled with a shimmering, viscous silver liquid. He looked tired, his eyes bloodshot from a 48-hour shift in the brain room. "Drink up, memory stimulants. We're doing the combat simulations today. The 1945 Grindelwald raids. We've projected his dueling style based on the memories we harvested. You're going to fight him. In my head, Harry asked, taking the vial. In your nervous system, Bode corrected. If he hits you in the sim, your heart stops in real life. High stakes, Harry. That's how we grow. Harry didn't hesitate. He downed the silver sludge. It tasted like lightning and ozone. Immediately, his vision began to fracture. The stone walls of the department melted away, replaced by the burning streets of Nuremberg. The smell of ash filled his lungs. He was standing in the middle of a war zone. Rubble was piled high, and the sky was a bruised purple, torn apart by stray spells. And there, standing atop a pile of shattered masonry, was Gellert Grindelwald. The man was a titan of redirected energy, his wand moving in arcs that defied physics. Come on then, little bird, the phantom Grindelwald hissed, his voice a jagged blade. Show me what the dark has taught you. Harry didn't draw a wand. He didn't have one. The unspeakables taught him that a wand was a crutch, a focal point for those too weak to command the world with their will. He raised his hands, his fingers splayed. You're just a memory, Harry whispered, his voice booming over the roar of the magical fires. And I'm the end of the line. The duel was a symphony of violence. Grindelwald launched a wave of blue-white fire that turned the cobblestones into glass. Harry didn't shield, he stepped through the space between the flames, his body flickering in and out of existence. This was the flick step, a technique developed in the time room, short-range teleportation that utilized micro-rifts in the space-time continuum. He appeared behind the Dark Lord, his hand glowing with a sickly violet light. Internal hemorrhage curse, Harry muttered. Grindelwald spun, his elder wand parrying the air itself, creating a shockwave T. Hat sent Harry flying backward through a brick wall. Harry hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him, but he was laughing. It was a cold, jagged sound. Pain is just information, he reminded himself, quoting Croker's first lesson. He stood up, spitting blood. He could feel the simulation pushing his brain to the breaking point. The silver liquid in his veins was boiling. He focused on the veil, on that feeling of absolute nothingness, that hunger that swallowed light. He reached into his core, past the scar that throbbed like a second heartbeat, and pulled. The ground around Harry began to disintegrate. Not into dust, but into nothing. Small spheres of pure annihilation formed around his fingertips. The void, the phantom Grindelwald said, his eyes widening with a flicker of genuine fear. They've taught you the language of the end. They didn't teach me, Harry said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, resonant bass. I found it. It was waiting for me. Harry lunged. He wasn't a wizard anymore. He was a singularity. He moved with a speed that blurred the simulation's ability to render him. He tore through Grindelwald's shields like they were wet paper. He didn't use fire, or ice, or lightning. He used absence. When his hand connected with the phantom's chest, there was no explosion. There was just a silent, terrifying collapse. The image of Grindelwald folded in on itself, drawn into the black holes at Harry's fingertips, until there was nothing left but a screaming silence. Harry collapsed as the simulation dissolved. He woke up on the floor of the time room, his skin covered in a fine layer of frost. Croker and Bode were standing over him, their expressions unreadable. You went too deep, Bode said, his voice trembling slightly. You weren't supposed to access the void state yet. Your brain should be scrambled eggs, kid. Harry sat up, wiping a trickle of blood from his ear. He looked at his hands. They were still shaking. He was fast, but he was limited. He was still trying to use magic to change things. I just used magic to stop things from being. Croker knelt down, grabbing Harry by the chin. He looked deep into the boy's eyes, searching for the person he knew. Harry, listen to me. That power, the stuff from the veil, it doesn't belong to you. You're just the conduit. If you let it in too far, there won't be a Harry left to save the world. You'll just be a hole in the universe. Maybe that's what the world needs, Saul, Harry said, pulling away. A hole for the garbage to fall into. You're sounding like a zealot, Croker snapped. Get to the infirmary. Wash the silver out of your system. You've got a visitor coming. Harry froze. A visitor? No one comes here. Not even the minister. This one does, Croker said, his face darkening. Albus Dumbledore is coming to check on his investment. And Harry, try to act like a normal kid. Don't mention the void. Don't mention the kill counts. Just talk about owls or something. Harry stood, brushing the dust off his black robes. I don't know anything about owls, Saul. But I know how to lie. The department taught me that, too. The meeting took place in the circular room. The doors spun frantically as Dumbledore entered, his colorful robes a jarring contrast to the monochromatic gloom of the department. He looked older than Harry remembered from the few photos he'd seen. His beard was long, his eyes twinkling with a forced warmth that Harry immediately identified as a tactical layer of misdirection. "Harry," Dumbledore said, his voice rich and soothing. "It has been a long time. You've grown quite tall." "Headmaster," Harry replied, his voice flat. He stood with his hands behind his back, his posture perfect, a soldier's stance. "I wasn't aware I was on the schedule for today." Dumbledore's eyes flickered to Croaker, who was leaning against a wall, picking his fingernails with a silver dagger. "The Department of Mysteries is a difficult place to schedule, Albus," Croaker said. "The boy is busy. We're in the middle of a cycle." "A cycle of what, Saul?" Dumbledore asked, his tone turning sharp. "I see the way he stands. I see the lack of light in his eyes. This was not the agreement. He was to be protected, yes, but he was also to be nurtured." "He is nurtured," Bode chimed in from the shadows. "He's the most educated 11-year-old in the history of Britain. He speaks 4 languages, can calculate the trajectory of a falling star, and can survive in the Forbidden Forest with nothing but a toothpick." "But can he love?" Dumbledore asked softly, stepping closer to Harry. Harry looked at the old man. He felt a strange sensation in his chest, not love, but a sort of clinical curiosity. He saw the way Dumbledore's magic hummed around him, a massive, golden aura that felt like a summer afternoon. It was beautiful, but to Harry, it looked inefficient. Too much energy wasted on the spectacle. Love is a chemical reaction designed to ensure the survival of the species through tribal bonding, Harry said, reciting a text from the mind room. In a combat scenario, it is a liability. It creates hesitation. Dumbledore looked like he'd been slapped. He turned to Croaker, his face pale. "What have you done to him? He's a child, not a golem. He's a survivor, Albus." Croaker barked, finally losing his cool. "While you were out there sipping tea and playing politics, we were watching the wards on the Longbottoms fail. We were watching the remnants of the Death Eaters gather in the shadows. We don't have time for love. We have a war to win before it even starts." "At what cost?" Dumbledore whispered. He turned back to Harry. "Harry, I am here to tell you that you will be attending Hogwarts this year. It is time for you to leave this place. To see the sun. To meet children your own age." Harry felt a spike of genuine interest. Hogwarts. The school. The Unspeakables said it was a security risk. "It is a necessity," Dumbledore insisted. "You must learn the magic of the people you are meant to protect. You cannot lead a world you do not understand." Harry looked at Croaker. The Unspeakable gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. This had been the plan all along, the infiltration phase. "Fine," Harry said. "I'll go. I'll wear your colors. I'll play your games. But Headmaster." Dumbledore paused at the door. "Yes, Harry, don't expect me to be a child. That version of me died in Godric's Hollow. The thing that's left, it doesn't play well with others." Dumbledore left without another word, his footsteps heavy. As soon as the doors clicked shut, the atmosphere in the room shifted back to its cold, calculating baseline. Croaker walked over to Harry and handed him a small, black box. "Your wand," Croaker said. Harry opened the box. The wand inside was white, stark, bone white. It felt heavy, cold, and pulsed with a rhythm that matched Harry's own heartbeat. "The core is a fragment of the Vale's anchor stone," Croaker whispered. "The wood is elder, harvested from a tree that grew on a battlefield where no one survived. It won't cast a lumos worth a damn, but it'll channel the void without melting in your hand." Harry gripped the wand. The room groaned. The shadows in the corners lengthened, reaching toward him like loyal hounds. "Hogwarts," Harry said, testing the word. It felt small. "What's my objective, Saul?" "Monitor the faculty. Identify the sleeper agents. Find the Horcruxes," Croaker said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "And Harry, if anyone tries to get too close, if anyone tries to break into your head, you show them why we're called the Unspeakables." Harry tucked the wand into a concealed holster on his forearm. He looked toward the door, his mind already calculating the variables of the castle, the students, and the man who thought he could control the boy from the dark. "I won't just show them, Saul," Harry said, his emerald eyes flashing with a terrifying, abyssal light. "I'll make them forget they ever existed." Quote. The boy raised in the dark stepped toward the light, not to join it, but to consume it. The Department of Mysteries had finished its work. The weapon was live. Outside, In the world above, the sun was shining, people were laughing, buying school supplies, and dreaming of a peaceful future. They had no idea that the boy who lived was coming to end their world. Just so he could build a better one from the ashes. Harry Potter took one last look at the veil. "See you soon," he whispered to the screaming silence. And for the first time in a decade, the veil whispered back. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Cold Architecture of Sociability. The Hogwarts Express wasn't a train to Harry, it was a pressurized metal tube hurtling through a geographical vacuum. He sat in the very last compartment. The one usually reserved for the luggage that didn't fit elsewhere. He didn't mind the smell of grease, old velvet, and the frantic, high-pitched emotions of Elevate. N-year-olds was an assault on his sensory dampeners. In the department, sound was a luxury. Here, it was a riot. Harry sat perfectly still, his bone-white wand resting across his knees. He wasn't reading, he was practicing a level 4 sensory expansion, mapping the magical signatures of everyone on the train. He could feel the bright, buzzing energy of the Weasley twins 3 cars up, chaotic, rhythmic. Like a malfunctioning clockwork toy. He could feel the dense, stagnant arrogance of a boy surrounded by 2 heavy, blunt objects in the front carriage. Then, there was the girl. She knocked on the door with a precision that suggested she had timed the interval between the train's vibrations. When she opened it, she didn't lead with a smile. She led with a question. "Has anyone seen a toad?" A boy named Neville's lost one. Harry didn't turn his head. He kept his eyes on the passing hills. The amphibian is currently under seat 4C in the 3rd carriage. It's hiding near a discarded chocolate frog wrapper. The humidity levels there are slightly higher due to a leaky pipe. Hermione Granger froze. She didn't look at the empty seats or the window. She looked at Harry's posture. She was a smart girl, too smart for her own good, and she recognized a predator when she saw one, even if that predator was wearing a brand new school robe. "How could you possibly know that?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave. "I didn't know it," Harry replied, finally turning his gaze toward her. His eyes were flat, like green glass buried under a frozen lake. "I felt the displacement of biological mass. Toads have a very specific magical resonance, damp, earthy, and slow. It stands out against the frantic buzzing of 300 overstimulated children." Hermione stepped into the compartment, forgetting the toad. "That's impossible. Sensory mapping isn't taught until the 6th year, and even then, only in advanced theory of charms." "Who are you?" "A student," Harry said. "And you're standing in my light." "You're Harry Potter," she whispered, her eyes darting to the faint, jagged line on his forehead. It wasn't the bright, angry red depicted in the history books. It was a pale, silvered ridge, a scar from a surgical strike. "Not a lucky survival. I've read about you. The rise and fall of the dark arts, great wizarding events of the 20th century. Or all works of fiction," Harry interrupted. "They weren't there. They didn't see the flash. They didn't feel the soul shredder. They just like the story because it makes them feel safe. Now, if you're done cataloging me, I have a trajectory to calculate." Hermione didn't leave. Instead, she sat down opposite him. "You're not like the others. You speak like an adult. Or a machine. I was raised by people who don't have time for the luxury of childhood." "Miss Granger," Harry said, his voice cold. "In the dark, you learn that words are either tools or noise. Most of yours are noise." Before she could respond, the compartment door slid open again. This time, it wasn't a girl looking for a toad. It was a boy with hair the color of tarnished silver and a face that looked like it had been carved from expensive soap. Draco M. Malfoy walked in like he owned the air Harry was breathing. "So, it's true then," Malfoy said, ignoring Hermione entirely. "Potter has come to Hogwarts. I'm Malfoy, Draco Malfoy, and these are Crabbe and Goyle." Harry didn't look at Malfoy. He looked at Crabbe and Goyle. He saw the way they held their weight, all on the balls of their feet, ready to strike but lacking the intellectual capacity to know when. They were blunt instruments. Malfoy was the hand that held them, but the hand was shaking. "You're nervous, Draco," Harry said softly. Malfoy's smirk faltered. "What? I'm not nervous. I'm offering you a hand, Potter. You'll soon find out that some wizarding families are better than others. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort." He cast a sneering glance at Hermione. Harry stood up. He didn't move fast, but the air in the compartment suddenly felt heavy, as if the atmospheric pressure had tripled. Malfoy took a half step back, his hand flying to his pocket. "I've NT 10 years in a place where, better, is measured by how long you can hold your breath in a vacuum, Harry said, stepping into Malfoy's personal space. He was shorter than the blonde boy, but he felt a mile tall. I don't care about your blood. I care about your utility. Right now, your utility is 0. You're a distraction from my focus. You can't talk to me like that, Malfoy hissed, his face flushing. My father, as a man who thinks gold can buy safety, Harry finished. He reached out, his hand moving so fast it was a blur, and gripped Malfoy's wrist. Malfoy gasped. It wasn't a hard grip, but it was precise. Harry's thumb pressed into a specific nerve cluster. Malfoy's arm went numb instantly. Go back to your seat, Draco, Harry whispered, his breath cold against Malfoy's ear. Anne, tell your father that Subject 7 is active. He'll know what it means. If he doesn't, tell him to look into the glass of his wine tonight and see if the shadows blink back. Malfoy scrambled out of the compartment, his cronies stumbling over their own feet to follow him. Hermione was staring at Harry, her mouth slightly open. That wasn't a spell, she said. Anatomy is just another form of architecture, Harry said. Sitting back down, break the right support beam, and the whole building falls. The rest of the journey was spent in a silence that Hermione found suffocating and Harry found restorative. When the train finally pulled into Hogsmeade Station, the transition from the dark carriage to the damp, misty night was seamless for Harry. He moved through the crowd of shouting students like a ghost, his eyes scanning the treeline, the castle silhouette, and the giant of a man calling for first years. Rubeus Hagrid was a massive biological anomaly. Harry noted the Geon T blood immediately, the density of the bone structure, the sheer magical resistance of the skin. He was a tank. Furs years over here. Hagrid roared. Harry followed the group to the boats. As they glided across the Black Lake, the others gasped at the sight of the castle, its windows glowing like embers in the dark. Harry didn't gasp. He looked at the wards. To his eyes, trained in the department's sensory tanks, Hogwarts wasn't just a building. It was a cage of shimmering, ancient energy. The wards were thick, layered like an onion, but they were old. They were frayed at the edges, bleeding power into the lake. It was a masterpiece of Victorian engineering that hadn't been serviced in a century. It's beautiful, isn't it? A voice whispered. It was a small, red-haired boy, Ron Weasley. It's a fortress with a hole in the basement, Harry replied. The Great Hall was an explosion of sensory data. The floating candles, the enchanted ceiling, the 4 long tables packed with students. Harry's internal processor went into overdrive, tagging every face, every wand position, every exit. He stood in the line of first years, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes. He didn't look at the students. He looked at the high table. Snape. The name clicked in his mind from the dossiers Croker had made him memorize. Severus Snape. Potions master, former Death Eater, double agent of questionable loyalty. Snape was staring at him with an intensity that bordered on the visceral. Harry met his gaze and didn't look away. He projected a flat, empty void into his mind, a technique called the White Room, occlumency. Snape flinched, his eyes widening for a fraction of a second before he masked it with a sneer. He had tried to probe Harry's mind and had hit a wall of absolute nothingness. Then there was Quirrell. The man was a walking contradiction. He smelled of garlic and fear, but beneath that, there was a secondary magical signature. It was faint, like a radio station fading out, but it was dark. It was the same oily, rhythmic pulse Harry had felt near the veil. Harry Potter. Professor McGonagall's voice cut through the murmurs. The hall went silent. Harry walked forward. He didn't trip. He didn't look nervous. He sat on the stool, and the sorting hat was placed over his eyes. Well, a voice whispered in his mind. What have we here? A mind forged in the deep. A heart tempered in the cold. You aren't a child, are you, Subject 7? Sort me, Harry thought, his mental voice a jagged edge. And don't look too deep. You might not like what looks back. Oh, I see it, the hat chuckled. Though there was a tremor in its tone. The hunger for knowledge of Ravenclaw, the ambition of Slytherin, but there is something else. A cold, hard sense of duty. A willingness to do what is necessary. You don't want to belong, Harry Potter. You want to accomplish. Efficiency over ego, Harry replied. I could put you in Slytherin, you'd be a king there. But you don't want a throne. You want a vantage point. You want to watch the gears turn. The hat took a long, shaky breath. Slytherin. The table under the silver and green banners erupted. Malfoy looked triumphant. Snape looked horrified. Dumbledore, at the center of the table, looked like he had just watched a catastrophe unfold in slow motion. Harry took off the hat and walked toward the Slytherin table. He didn't sit with Malfoy. He sat at the very end, near the exit. The feast appeared, piles of roasted meats, potatoes, pies. Harry took a small portion of protein and vegetables. He ate with mechanical precision, his eyes never leaving the room. "You're the talk of the school, you know," a girl sitting across from him said. She had sharp features and dark hair tied back in a severe bun. Pansy Parkinson, a Potter in Slytherin. That hasn't happened in, well, ever. History is a record of patterns, Harry said, not looking up from his plate. Patterns are meant to be broken when they no longer serve a purpose. "You think you're better than us?" a boy named Zabini asked, leaning forward. "I think I'm different than you," Harry said. "You're here because of who your parents are. I'm here because of what I can do. There is a fundamental difference in our gravity." The conversation died. The Slytherins, usually so keen on social maneuvering, found themselves faced with a boy who didn't play the game. Harry wasn't a piece on their board, he was the board itself. After the feast, they were led to the dungeons. The Slytherin common room was an underwater tomb, cold, green, and silent. It felt more like home to Harry than the Great Hall had. Snape entered the room 10 minutes later, his cloak billowing like a cloud of ink. He gave the standard speech about the pride of the house and the expectations of excellence. But his eyes stayed glued to Harry. "Potter," Snape said, his voice a low hiss. "A word." Harry followed Snape into a small side chamber. The potions master met the door and silenced it with a flick of his wand. "What are you?" Snape demanded, his face inches from Harry's. "I tried to read you. There was nothing. No memories, no emotions. Just a void. He Department of Mysteries doesn't believe in open-door policies, Professor," Harry said, his voice perfectly level. "You are a boy, an 11-year-old boy who should be terrified." Snape roared. "Do you have any idea the danger you are in? The Dark Lord's followers are in this very house." "I know," Harry said. "I've already identified 3 who are likely to report to their parents by morning." They also identified the fact that you are terrified of me." "Why is that, Professor? Is it because I look like my father, or because I act like the thing that killed him?" Snape recoiled as if burned. "Your father was a fool. A loud, arrogant fool, and I am a weapon," Harry said. "Don't confuse the two. I'm not here to play at being a student, and I'm not here to be your redemption project. I have a job to do. Stay out of my way, and I'll stay out of yours." Harry turned and walked out of the room before Snape could respond. That night, in the Slytherin dorms, Harry didn't sleep. He sat on his bed, the green curtains drawn. He took out a small, metallic sphere, a communication device from the department. He tapped it 3 times. A holographic image of Saul Croaker appeared in the air, no larger than a thumb. "Report," Croaker said. "I'm in," Harry whispered. "Slytherin House. The headmaster is concerned. Snape is compromised by his own emotions. And the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor is carrying a parasitic entity." Quote. Croaker's image flickered. "A parasite, explain." "A dual soul signature. One is weak, stuttering. The other is dormant but potent. It feels like the Veil. It feels like him, Voldemort," Croaker said, the name sounding like a curse. "If he's in the school, the timeline has shifted. We expected him to wait. He isn't waiting. He's looking for something. Something in the school. The Philosopher's Stone," Croaker realized. "Dumbledore moved it from Gringotts. Harry, your objective remains the same, but the priority has increased. Secure the stone. Do not let the parasite have it." "Understood," Harry said. "And Harry, yes, don't get caught up in the school life. The kids, the games, it's a distraction." Harry looked at the dark stones of the dungeon wall. He felt the cold, the silence, and the weight of the wand in his hand. "I don't know how to be a child, Saul," Harry said. "The distraction isn't the problem. The problem is that I'm starting to think this castle is too small for what I'm becoming." He deactivated the device. The next morning, Harry sat in the library before classes began. He wasn't looking for magic, he was looking for the castle's blueprints. He needed to know the layout of the pipes, the hidden passages, the places where the wards were thinnest. "You're up early." It was Hermione. She was carrying a stack of books that nearly obscured her face. She sat down next to him, her expression a mix of annoyance and curiosity. "I don't sleep much," Harry said. "I was thinking about what you said on the train, she said, setting her books down. About the toad, you said you felt its resonance. I looked it up. That's a term used in high-level alchemy. Where did you learn that? In a basement in London, Harry said. You're very cryptic. It's annoying. Truth is rarely simple, Hermione. If it were, everyone would be doing it. She looked at the map he was drawing. That's the 3rd floor. It's forbidden this year. Dumbledore said we'd die a very painful death if we went there. Death is only painful if you're fighting it, Harry said, his pen scratching against the parchment. If you embrace it, it's just a transition. Besides, Dumbledore only forbids things he wants to keep for himself. You shouldn't talk about the headmaster like that, she whispered, scandalized. Harry stopped drawing. He looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the spark in her, the hunger for more than just what was in the books. She was a diamond in the rough, unpolished but high density. Hermione, Harry said, his voice uncharacteristically soft. The world is a much darker place than your textbooks suggest. There are things in this school that would make your soul scream. If you want to survive the next 7 years, stop looking at the rules and start looking at the shadows. Why are you telling me this? Because, Harry said, standing up. In every calculation, there is a variable that shouldn't be there. You're my variable, Hermione. Don't make me regret noticing you. He left her there, stunned and silent. As Harry walked to his first class, potions, he felt the parasitic energy of Quirrell nearby. He felt the weight of the stone walls. And deep in his chest, the void hummed. The game was beginning. The Department of Mysteries had released their wolf into the sheepfold, but they had forgotten nay thing. Even a wolf can grow tired of being a weapon. But for now, Harry Potter was exactly what they made him. He was the dark in the corner, the silence in the scream, and the only thing standing between Voldemort and immortality. He stepped into the potions classroom. Snape was waiting. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur and ancient grudges. Harry took his seat. He pulled out his wand. Let's begin, he whispered to the empty air. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Anatomy of a Ghost. The dungeons were not just cold, they were thermally stagnant. To the average student, it was a place of damp stones and flickering torches. To Harry, it was a laboratory of human frailty. He watched his classmates shiver, their breath hitching in the recycled air, their focus breaking under the weight of the atmosphere. Severus Snape moved through the classroom like a predatory bird, his robe snapping against his heels. He was looking for a victim. He found one in Neville Longbottom, whose call, drawn, was currently emitting a smell reminiscent of burning rubber and failure. Longbottom, Snape whispered, his voice a silk-wrapped blade. Tell me, did you fail to read the instructions, or is the concept of a simple boil cure potion beyond your limited cognitive functions? Harry sat at the back, his own cauldron simmering with a perfect, translucent blue. He didn't use a scale. He didn't need one. He could feel the molecular density of the porcupine quills. He knew the exact moment the heat reached the critical threshold of 375 Kelvin. The boy is distracted by fear, Professor, Harry said. The room went silent. Even the bubbles in the cauldron seemed to pause. Snape turned slowly, his eyes narrowing into slits. Potter, I don't recall asking for your psychological assessment of your peers. Fear triggers a cortisol spike, Harry continued, his voice as flat as a dial tone. It causes a tremor in the fine motor skills. He didn't add the quills too early because he's stupid, he added them because his sympathetic nervous system is in a fight-or-flight loop. You're the stressor. If you want a better potion, you should lower the atmospheric tension. It's a matter of efficiency. The Slytherins gasped. Malfoy looked like he wanted to cheer and hide at the same time. Snape walked toward Harry's desk, his presence looming like a thundercloud. You think you're a master of the mind, do you? Snape hissed. Because you've been poked and prodded by the unspeakables. You are a child. You know nothing of the nuance of this art. I know that your potion is currently 2% too acid. I see, because you're letting your anger boil over into your stirring rhythm, Harry said, pointing a finger at Snape's personal cauldron at the front. And I know that you've been looking at my scar for the last 10 minutes. Wondering if there's a piece of the man who killed my mother still lodged inside it. The air in the room didn't just turn cold, it crystallized. Snape's face went from pale to a ghostly, translucent white. He leaned down, his face inches from Harry's. 5 points from Slytherin, Snape whispered, for your intolerable arrogance. And you will stay behind after class. We are going to have a talk about boundaries. Potter. Boundaries are for people who have something to lose, Harry replied. When the bell rang, The students scrambled out, leaving Harry and Snape in the sulphurous gloom. Snape flicked his wand, and the heavy oak door slammed shut, the locks clicking with finality. "Who are you working for?" Snape demanded. "Dumbledore thinks you're his ward. The Ministry thinks you're their poster boy. But I saw your eyes when you walked in here. You don't have the look of a ward. You have the look of an assassin." Harry stood up, his movements fluid. He didn't look like a student. He looked like a shadow that had taken human form. "I work for the preservation of the timeline, Severus. The department doesn't care about your petty house points or your old schoolyard grudges. They care about the fact that a piece of the most dangerous wizard in history is currently inhabiting the back of our defense teacher's head." Snape froze. His hand twitched toward his left forearm, where the dark mark lay dormant. You know about that." "I can feel it," Harry said, stepping closer. "It pulses, like a heartbeat in a coffin. Quirrell is a vessel. He's a dead man walking. He just hasn't realized it yet. And you're playing both sides, hoping that when the dust settles, someone will still be alive to give you a pat on the head. You speak of things you cannot understand," Snape growled. But the bite was gone. There was only a hollow, echoing fear. "I understand that you loved her," Harry said. Snape's breath hitched. It was the only crack in his armor. But it was wide enough for Harry to drive a truck through. "Lily," Harry whispered, the name feeling strange on his tongue. "The department has her records. Her death wasn't just a tragedy, it was a ritual. She didn't just die for me. She anchored me to this world. And if you ever try to enter my mind again, I will show you exactly what it felt like for her to burn." Harry turned and walked to the door. He didn't wait for a response. He didn't need one. He had established dominance in the only currency Snape understood, pain and secrets. The following weeks were a blur of calculated isolation. Harry excelled in every class. Not by trying, but by treating magic as a series of geometric problems to be solved. In Transfiguration, he didn't imagine a matchstick becoming a needle, he rewrote the molecular lattice of the wood into steel. McGonagall watched him with a mixture of awe and profound sadness. She saw the genius, but she couldn't find the boy. Halloween arrived with a heavy, oppressive fog that rolled off the Black Lake and swallowed the castle. The Great Hall was decorated with floating pumpkins, but Harry could taste the shift in the ambient magic. Something was wrong. The parasitic energy he'd been tracking in Quirrell was peaking. He was sitting at the Slytherin table when Quirrell burst in, his turban askew, screaming about a troll in the dungeons. "Troll, in the dungeon, thought you ought to know." Quirrell fainted. The hall erupted in panic. Dumbledore stood, his voice booming to restore order, sending the houses to their dormitories. Harry didn't move. He watched the Slytherins file out. Malfoy looking genuinely terrified. Harry looked at the high table. Snape was already gone, slipping through a side door. "The troll is a diversion," Harry muttered. He slipped under the table. Utilizing a camouflage charm, the unspeakables had burned into his skin, not a spell, but a biological manipulation of light. He vanished. He didn't head for the dungeons. He headed for the third-floor corridor. The castle was silent, the stone walls whispering as he sprinted up the stairs. He reached the forbidden door and felt the wards humming. They were set to alert Dumbledore to any magical breach. But Harry didn't use magic. He pulled a set of silver wires from his sleeve, no mage lockpicks modified with goblin silver tips. Click. He slipped inside. The room was dome-in, aided by a three-headed dog the size of a small house. Fluffy. The beast roared, 3 sets of teeth baring in the darkness. Harry didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black K cylinder, a Department of Mysteries sonic dampener. He twisted the top. A frequency emitted, one far above human hearing but agonizing to a canine's sensitive ears. The giant dog whimpered, its heads drooping as it slumped into a forced sleep. Harry stepped over the massive paws and looked at the trapdoor. He opened it and dropped into the darkness. He landed on something soft and squishy. Devil's snare. The vines began to wrap around his legs, sensing the warmth of his blood. Harry didn't panic. He didn't use fire. He used the void. He closed his eyes and let the coldness from his core seep into his skin. The plant, which thrived on life and warmth, recoiled as if it had touched a glacier. The vines withered, turning black and brittle. Harry stepped through the remains. The next room was filled with flying keys. A broom sat in the center. Primitive, Harry whispered. He didn't get on the broom. He looked at the keys, his eyes tracking their flight paths. He saw the one with the broken wing. The one that hummed at a slightly different frequency. He pulled his bone-white wand. Avis gravity, he muttered. The air in the room suddenly became 10 times heavier. The keys slammed into the floor, pinned by the localized gravitational well. Harry walked over, picked up the silver key, and unlocked the next door. The giant chess set was a masterpiece of combat AI. The stone pieces looked at him with hollow eyes. I don't have time for a game, Harry said. He looked at the floor. The tiles were the triggers. He didn't play the game, he destroyed the board. He pointed his wand at the ceiling. Confringo. The explosion showered the room in stone dust. Harry didn't wait for the dust to settle. He used the distraction to sprint across the board, his feet barely touching the tiles. The White Queen swung her stone sword, but Harry was already a shadow, sliding between her legs and through the door before the pieces could reset. Finally, he reached the inner chamber. It wasn't Quirrell, it was Snape. The potion's master was standing in front of a massive, ornate mirror, the mirror of Arised. He was clutching his leg, which was bleeding heavily. Potter, Snape gasped, his face twisted in pain. How are you here? I could ask you the same thing, Professor, Harry said, his wand level. But I think the dog already gave me the answer. You were trying to protect the stone. I was trying to stop him. Snape growled. Quirrell, he's not alone. I know, Harry said. He looked at the mirror. He saw his own reflection, but he didn't see himself as a boy. He saw a version of himself made of pure black glass, standing in a field of stars. Behind him stood 2 figures, a man and a woman, their faces blurred, their hands resting on his shoulders. He felt a pang of something, not love, but a deep, resonant emptiness. The mirror shows the heart's desire, Snape whispered, watching Harry. What do you see, boy? Power, glory, your parents. I see a version of myself that doesn't have to be a weapon. Harry said. Suddenly, the door behind them burst open. Quirrell entered, but he wasn't stuttering. He moved with a cold, terrifying grace. His eyes were bloodshot, and his skin looked like it was rotting off his bones. Severus, Quirrell hissed, you were always too clever for your own good. And the boy is a bonus. Move away from the mirror, Quirrell, Harry said, his voice dropping into that abyssal bass. Quirrell laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. The mirror is the key. But I cannot see it. I see myself presenting the stone to my master, but I don't know how to get it. Use the boy, a second voice whispered. It seemed to come from the air itself. Quirrell grabbed Harry, pulling him in front of the glass. Look into the mirror and tell me where the stone is. Harry looked. In the reflection, his glass self reached into his pocket and pulled out a blood-red stone. Then, he felt a weight in his actual pocket. The mirror of Arised had judged him. It knew that he didn't want the stone for himself, he wanted it as a mission objective. He has it, the second voice shrieked. I can feel its heat. Kill him, take it. Quirrell lunged for Harry's throat. The moment his hands touched Harry's skin, a horrific scream tore through the room. Quirrell's hands began to blister and smoke. What is this? Quirrell screamed, falling back. What is he? It's not love, you fool, Harry said, standing over him. It's a mismatch in frequency. My body is anchored to the department. I am tuned to the veil. Your master is a ghost, but I am the silence that swallows ghosts. Harry reached out and grabbed Quirrell's face. The contact was explosive. Gold and black energy clashed, a literal war of souls happening in the palm of Harry's hand. Let me go, the second voice roared. Quirrell's body began to crumble into ash. The parasitic soul, the remnant of Voldemort, tore itself free from the dying flesh, a cloud of black smoke with a screaming face. It surged toward Harry, trying to possess him, to find a new home in the boy's powerful core. Harry didn't move. He opened his mouth and did something the unspeakables had told him never to do. He inhaled. The black smoke was sucked into Harry's lungs. His eyes turned entirely black. His skin went cold as the grave. For a moment, 2 minds battled for control of a single body. Voldemort's rage, his decades of murder and hate, slammed into the ice-cold logic of the department's Subject 7. I will burn you from the inside out. Voldemort's voice echoed in Harry's mind. You are a fragment, Harry replied. I am the abyss. You can't burn the dark. Harry's core flared. The void within him expanded, wrapping around the fragment of Voldemort like a shroud. He didn't destroy it, he neutralized it, shoving it down into the deepest, darkest corner of his subconscious, where even he couldn't find it. Harry collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. The stone was heavy in his pocket. Snape was staring at him, horrified. What did you just do? I ended the threat, Harry whispered, his voice trembling. You didn't kill him, Snape said, his voice shaking. You absorbed him. He's contained, Harry said, standing up with effort. He pulled the red stone from his pocket. It felt like a warm heart. Tell Dumbledore the stone is safe. Tell him the department will be taking custody of the asset. He won't let you, Snape said. He doesn't have a choice, Harry said. He looked at the mirror one last time. His reflection was gone. There was only the dark. He walked out of the chamber, leaving Snape alone with the ash of a dead man. As he climbed the stairs, Harry felt the change. The weight in his mind was new. The fragment of the Dark Lord was there, a pulsing, angry ember in the dark. He hadn't just saved the school. He had taken the devil inside himself. He reached the great hall, which was now empty and silent. He walked to the center of the RO. And looked up at the enchanted ceiling. It was showing a storm, black clouds, lightning, and a sky that looked like it was crying. Mission accomplished, Saul, Harry whispered into the air. But deep down, in the place where the void met the stolen soul, Harry knew the truth. This wasn't the end of the war. It was the beginning of his evolution. The boy from the Department of Mysteries was no longer just a weapon. He was a cage, and the thing inside him was starting to scream. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. The Architecture of a Cage. The recovery wing of the Department of Mysteries didn't have windows, and it didn't have clocks. Time was measured by the rhythmic drip of nutrient charms into Harry's veins and the low, subsonic hum of the containment wards. He lay on a slab of cold obsidian, his chest rising and falling in a slow, unnatural cadence. Inside his mind, it was a war of attrition. The fragment of Tom Riddle wasn't a passive guest. It was a corrosive acid, constantly testing boundaries of the white room Harry had built around it. It whispered in a voice that sounded like grinding glass, offering secrets of blood magic and the true names of demons. Harry ignored it, using instead on the geometric patterns of his own pulse. The door hissed open. Saul Croaker walked in, followed by a man Harry didn't recognize, a tall, skeletal figure with eyes that looked like burnt-out stars. He's stable, Croaker said, his voice unusually tight. But the readings are off the charts, Director. He's not just holding the soul shard, he's beginning to metabolize the energy signature. The Director leaned over Harry, his presence feeling like a weight on Harry's lungs. Subject 7, can you hear me? Harry opened his eyes. They weren't green anymore. They were a swirling, chaotic sea of emerald and obsidian. I hear everything, Harry rasped. I hear the stone humming in the vault 3 floors down. I hear the heartbeat of the man in the brain room. And I hear him. The Dark Lord, the Director asked. He's not a lord, Harry said, sitting up with a sudden, violent grace. The nutrient tube snapped, the golden liquid spilling onto the floor. He's a parasite. He's a mistake that thinks it's a god. He wants out. And you, I want to know why you didn't tell me what I am, Harry said, his voice dropping into that terrifying, dual-toned resonance. I'm not just a student you trained. I'm a vessel. This was always the plan, wasn't it? To use the Potter boy as a sentient trap for the remnants of Voldemort. Croaker looked away. The Director didn't blink. The department deals in certainties, Harry. The Director said. The prophecy made you the only viable containment unit. Your mother's sacrifice didn't just protect you, it modified your soul's lattice. You are the only thing in existence that can hold a piece of him without being consumed by it. I'm being consumed right now, Harry countered. He held out his hand. Small sparks of black fire danced between his fingers. He's leaking. His memories are bleeding into mine. I know what it feels like to kill. I know how the air tasted in 1945. I'm losing the line between the weapon and the target. Then we sharpen the edge, Croaker said, stepping forward. We're moving you to the death chamber for the next phase. You need to learn to use his power against the others. There are more shards out there, Harry. Horcruxes. Harry stood up. He felt a surge of cold fury. His own, or Riddle's, he couldn't tell. You want me to be a hunter? We want you to be the end of the conversation, the Director said. The summer was spent in the dark. While the rest of the wizarding world celebrated the year of peace, Harry Potter was dying and being reborn every single day. They pushed him into the veil's proximity, letting the gravitational pull of the afterlife strip away the unnecessary parts of his ego. He learned to reach into the cage and pull out specific threads of Voldemort's power. He Ned the Cruciatus not by wanting to cause pain, but by understanding the precise vibration required to overload the human nervous system. He learned to fly without a broom, manifesting the same black smoke that the Dark Lord used. A physical manifestation of a soul trying to escape its skin. By the time August rolled around, Harry was a different creature. He was leaner, his skin almost translucent, and his movements had a predatory economy that made even the senior unspeakables uneasy. "You're going back," Croaker told him as they stood in the Hall of Prophecy. "To Hogwarts?" Harry asked. He was holding a small, crystal orb. Inside, a storm of gray smoke swirled. "Dumbledore is pushing for it. He thinks he can still save you. Let him think that. We need you close to the faculty. Something is moving in the school again. Something old." "The chamber," Harry whispered. Croaker paused. "How do you know about that?" "He knows," Harry said, tapping his temple. "Riddle. He's dreaming about a snake. A big one. He thinks it's his legacy. He wants me to wake it up." "Don't," Croaker warned. "I don't take orders from ghosts, Saul," Harry said. "If the snake is a variable, I'll solve it." He returned to King's Cross was a surreal experience. Harry stood on platform 9 3/4, watching parents hug their children. He felt like an alien observing a primitive ritual. He saw the Weasleys, a sea of red hair and loud, messy affection. He saw Hermione. She looked different. She was taller, her hair slightly more tamed, and her eyes were searching the crowd with a frantic intensity. When she saw him, she froze. She didn't run to him. She walked, her steps hesitant. "Harry," she asked. She looked at his eyes and flinched. "What happened to you this summer? You look like you've been bleached." "I've been working, Hermione," Harry said. He didn't offer to help with her trunk. He didn't smile. "The world doesn't stop turning just because school is out. I wrote to you," she said, her voice small. "Every week. You never replied." "The department doesn't have a mail service," Harry said. "And I didn't have anything to say that wouldn't have been redacted by the ministry censors." They boarded the train. This time, Harry didn't go to the back. He walked straight to the Slytherin section. Malfoy was there, surrounded by his usual guards. He looked up, ready to deliver a pre-rehearsed insult. But the words died in his throat when he saw Harry's face. "Potter," Malfoy managed, his voice cracking. "Draco," Harry said. He sat down in the center of the carriage. "I hope your father enjoyed his summer. Tell him I've been practicing. I'd love to show him what I've learned about the dark arts he loves so much." Malfoy didn't say a word for the rest of the trip. The atmosphere at Hogwarts was different this year. There was a lingering tension, a sense of impending rot. It started with the messages on the walls. "The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware." The school was in a state of panic. Muggle-borns were whispering in corners, and the teachers were patrolling the halls with their wands out. Harry, however, was calm. He spent his nights in the library, not looking at history books, but tracing the ley lines of the castle's foundation. He found it in the girls' bathroom on the second floor. He stood in front of the sink, the ghost of Myrtle moaning in the stalls behind him. He didn't need to look for a hidden switch. He could feel the resonance of the magic, Parseltongue-coated wards, ancient and hungry. "Open," Harry hissed. The sink plummeted into the floor, revealing a dark, slime-covered pipe. Harry didn't jump. He let the black smoke billow from his robes, lifting him into the air. He descended with a silent, terrifying grace. The Chamber of Secrets was a cathedral of bone and green light. Massive snake statues lined the walkway leading to a colossal bust of Salazar Slytherin. "So," Harry said, his voice echoing in the vast space. "This is the big secret. It is my kingdom," the voice of Riddle hissed in his mind. Call the King of Serpents. Let it see what we have become." "I don't do requests," Harry muttered. He walked to the base of the statue. He could feel the creature inside. It was massive, a biological titan of pure killing intent. "Speak to me, Slytherin, greatest of the Hogwarts Four," Harry hissed. The mouth of the statue groaned open. Out of the darkness, the basilisk slid. It was 50 feet of armored scales and yellow eyes that promised instant death. Harry didn't close his eyes. The basilisk froze. It looked at Harry, its tongue flickering. It didn't strike. It sensed the void in the boy, the cold, abyssal energy that was even older than its own ancient bloodline. But more than that, it sensed the fragment of its master. "Master," the snake hissed, its voice a low rumble that vibrated in Harry's marrow. "You are small, and you smell of the cold beyond. I'm the upgrade," Harry said in Parseltongue. "And you're a relic." Quote, "Kill him," Riddle screamed in Harry's head. Use the beast to purge the school. Start with the Granger girl. Harry's eyes flared. A shockwave of black energy erupted from his body, slamming into the walls of the chamber. I told you to stay silent. The basilisk recoiled, bearing fangs the size of Short's words. It sensed the instability. It prepared to strike, its head cocking back, the killing gaze fixing on Harry's face. Harry didn't draw his wand. He reached out with his bare hand. I am the Department of Mysteries, Harry whispered, his voice sounding like 1,000 people speaking at once. I am the weight of the veil. I am the silence that follows the scream. The basilisk lunged. Harry didn't move. He let the black smoke explode from his skin, forming a massive, spectral hand that caught the snake by the throat midair. The force of the impact cracked the stone floor. The snake thrashed, its tail shattering statues, but Harry's grip was absolute. He wasn't using physical strength. He was using the sheer, crushing weight of his magical core, augmented by the void. You're not a king, Harry told the snake, his face inches from its massive, lidless eye. You're an asset, and you're going to help me find the others. He pressed his hand against the snake's snout. He didn't kill it, he did something much worse. He began to siphon the creature's life force, using it as a fuel source to sharpen his own connection to the Horcruxes. The basilisk shivered, its massive body turning gray as its magical essence was drained into Harry. It wasn't death, it was a binding. Suddenly, a shadow moved at the edge of the chamber. Harry, it was Ginny Weasley. She looked pale, her eyes glazed over. She was clutching a small, black diary. The girl, Harry muttered, his eyes narrowing. He realized then that Riddle had played him. The fragment inside him was just a distraction, a secondary processor. The primary soul shard was in that book, and it was using the girl to channel enough life force to manifest. A ghostly figure began to form next to Ginny. A handsome, dark-haired boy of 16. Tom Riddle. Incredible, the ghost Riddle said, looking at Harry with genuine fascination. You've tamed the basilisk, and you've done it using my power, yet filtered through something colder. Who are you? I'm the guy who's about to delete your save file, Harry said. Releasing the basilisk, the snake slumped to the floor, weakened but alive. You have a piece of me inside you, the ghost said, walking toward him. I can feel it. We're brothers, Harry. Why fight? Together, we could rewrite the laws of magic. We could tear down the ministry and build something eternal. I've seen eternal, Harry said, his wand sliding into his hand. It's a very quiet, very dark room. It's boring. I prefer results. Then you'll die with the rest of the failures. Riddle roared. He raised Ginny's wand, but Harry was faster. He didn't use a spell. He used a localized chronal distortion, a trick from the time room. The air between them slowed to a crawl. Harry walked through the frozen space, the diary in Ginny's hand looking like a stationary target. He reached out and snatched the book. Time snapped back to normal. What? Riddle gasped, his form flickering. Harry held the diary up. He didn't use a basilisk fang. He reached into his own chest, metaphorically, and pulled out a jagged shard of pure void energy. This is the difference between us, Tom, Harry said. You're afraid of the dark. I was raised in it. He slammed the void shard into the heart of the diary. A scream tore through the chamber, a sound so loud and horrific it felt like the world was ending. Ink erupted from the pages like blood. The ghost of Riddle Shaw. Tetred into 1,000 pieces of light before being sucked into the void Harry had created. Ginny collapsed, breathing but unconscious. Harry stood in the silence, the smoking remains of the diary at his feet. He felt a sudden, sharp pain in his head. The fragment inside him was howling in agony, its connection to its twin severed. One down, Harry whispered. He looked up. Dumbledore was standing at the entrance of the chamber. His wand held low, his face a mask of profound grief. Harry, the headmaster said. What have you done? I did your job, Albus, Harry said, turning to face him. His eyes were still black, his skin still smoking with the residue of the void. I found the rot, I cut it out, and I didn't need a phoenix or a sword to do it. You've used magic that no soul was meant to touch, Dumbledore said. Stepping closer. You're bleeding, Harry, not blood, but light. You're coming apart. Then let me break, Harry said. Just make sure you're out of the way when the pieces hit the floor. Harry walked past Dumbledore, the basilisk following him like a loyal hound. The department's weapon had successfully engaged its first target, but the cost was becoming visible. Harry Potter wasn't just a cage anymore. He was becoming the monster he was meant to catch. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The kinetics of collateral damage. The hospital wing was a sanctuary for the weak. Hitch was why Harry hated the smell of it. The sterile scent of dittany and medicinal drafts felt like an insult to the raw, metallic tang of the department's combat levels. He wasn't in a bed, he was standing by the window, watching the sunset bleed over the forbidden forest. Behind him, Albus Dumbledore sat in a simple wooden chair. The headmaster looked every bit his age, the lines on his face etched deep by the flickering candlelight. "The girl will recover, Harry," Dumbledore said softly. "Ginny Weasley owes you her life. But the Ministry is asking questions. They want to know how an 11-year-old boy, now 12, managed to navigate the plumbing of a 1,000-year-old castle and subdue a king of serpents." "Tell them I'm a quick study," Harry replied without turning. "And tell them, the Basilisk is now a Department of Mysteries asset. It's been tagged, neutralized, and relocated to the Level 9 holding pens. It's no longer your concern. It was never my concern as much as it was my responsibility." Dumbledore countered, his voice rising slightly. "Harry, you are playing with forces that do not recognize your authority. You absorbed a memory, a soul fragment, and then you used the void to strike down another. Do you feel the weight of it yet? The cold in your bones that no fire can warm?" Harry finally turned. The sunset caught the obsidian swirl in his eyes. "I don't need to be warm, Albus. Warmth is for people who have homes to go back to. I have a mission, and according to my internal diagnostics, I'm ahead of schedule. You are a boy, not a clockwork soldier." Dumbledore stood, his magic flaring briefly, a golden pressure that pushed against the shadows in the room. "I will not stand by while Saul Croaker turns the son of James and Lily into a hollow shell. I have filed a formal injunction with the Wizengamot. You will stay at Hogwarts for the summer. You will stay under my protection." Harry stepped forward into the circle of Dumbledore's light. He didn't flinch. "Protection? You couldn't protect my parents. You couldn't protect the Longbottoms. You couldn't even protect a first-year girl from a diary. Your protection is a beautiful lie, Headmaster. He department is the only place that deals in the truth. And what is that truth, Harry?" "That the world is a series of threats waiting to happen," Harry said, his voice a jagged rasp. "And I am the only one calibrated to stop them." The summer was a stalemate. Dumbledore won the legal battle, but he lost the war for Harry's soul. Harry remained at the castle, but he was a ghost in the halls. He didn't eat in the Great Hall. He hunted in the forest, testing his speed against the Acromantula. He didn't sleep in the dorms, he slept in the room of requirement, which he had willed into a replica of the department's sensory deprivation tanks. By the time the third year began, the atmosphere in Britain had shifted. The news of Sirius Black's escape from Azkaban hit the wizarding world like a physical blow. To the public, he was a madman, a traitor. To the Department of Mysteries, he was a loose thread. Black is a Priority 1 retrieval, Croaker's voice crackled through the communication sphere one rainy September night. "The Ministry has deployed Dementors to Hogwarts. They think they're for security. We know they're a liability. They react to the void in you, Harry. They'll see you as a feast, not a student. Let them come," Harry said, staring at the Dementors hovering at the edge of the school gates. To him, they looked like rips in the fabric of reality, hunger given form. "I've been wanting to see how they taste." Quote, "Focus, Harry," Croaker snapped. "Black was the Potter's secret keeper. He's the one who gave the Dark Lord your coordinates. If he's coming for you, it's to finish the job. Or maybe he's coming to see what his mistake grew into," Harry muttered. The first encounter happened on the Quidditch pitch. Harry didn't play the game, he found the idea of chasing a ball on a stick to be a pathetic waste of kinetic potential, but he was in the stands, observing the tactical formations of the Gryffindor team. He was watching for Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, his two variables. The sky turned to iron. The temperature plummeted. The rain froze midair, turning into jagged needles of ice. 100 Dementors descended, drawn not by the players, but by the massive, swirling vortex of dark energy that was Harry Potter. They ignored the screaming students. They ignored the falling players. They swarmed toward the Slytherin section, a tidal wave of rot and despair. "Harry, get out of here!" Hermione screamed from a few rows down, her face pale with terror. Harry stood up. He felt the Dementor's aura, the cold, the hopelessness, the way they tried to peel back his skin to get to the memories beneath. They hit his occlumency walls like a battering ram. They found the White Room. They found the cage. And then, they found the void. Expecto Patronum. Dumbledore's voice roared from across the pitch, a massive silver phoenix erupting from his wand. But Harry was faster. He didn't use a Patronus. He didn't have a happy memory strong enough to drive away the dark. He had something better. He had the dark itself. Harry raised his bone-white wand, but he didn't point it at the Dementors. He pointed it at his own chest. Nulla Vita, Harry whispered. An explosion of absolute blackness erupted from Harry. It wasn't smoke, and it wasn't fire. It was a field of anti-magic, a localized cancellation of life force. The Dementors, creatures that lived on the edge of existence, suddenly found themselves in a vacuum where there was nothing to consume. They didn't just flee. They began to dissolve. The shrieks were not human. They were the sounds of the universe trying to fill a hole that shouldn't exist. The Dementors at the front of the swarm turned to ash, their tattered cloaks fluttering away into the rain. The rest scrambled backward, fleeing from the boy as if he were the sun. The pitch went silent. The rain started to fall again, normal and cold. Harry stood in the center of a scorched circle of grass. His robes were tattered, and his skin was covered in a frost that didn't melt. He looked up at Dumbledore, who was hovering on a broom, his phoenix light fading. They were hungry, Harry said, his voice echoing in the silence. I just gave them a different kind of meal. He walked off the pitch, leaving 1,000 witnesses in a state of clinical shock. That night, Harry was intercepted in the clock tower by a man who smelled of old chocolate and weariness. Remus Lupin, the new defense professor. That was a dangerous display, Harry, Lupin said, his wand tucked into his belt. The Ministry is going to have a field day with this. You didn't just repel them. You destroyed them. Dementors are considered indestructible. Nothing is indestructible, Professor, Harry said, leaning against the cold stone. Everything has a frequency. You just have to find the one that makes it cancel itself out. It's basic acoustics. Lupin walked closer, his eyes searching Harry's face. You look so much like James. But the way you speak, the way you move, it's like looking at a ghost of someone who never lived. James would have fought them with a laugh and a silver stag. You fought them like you were one of them. James Potter is dead, Harry said. And I'm the reason. If he were here, he'd probably be terrified of me. Just like you are. Lupin flinched. I'm not terrified of you, Harry. I'm terrified for you. I knew your parents. I was their friend. And I knew Sirius Black. Then you know he's coming for me, Harry said. And you know why. I think the why is more complicated than the department tells you, Lupin whispered. The climax came in the shrieking shack. Harry had tracked the signatures, Lupin's erratic, moon-fevered pulse, the frantic, scuttling rhythm of a rat, and the heavy, jagged thrum of a man who had spent 12 years in hell. Harry burst through the door, his wand already humming. Sirius Black stood in the corner, a skeletal wreck of a man with eyes that burned with a manic intensity. Lupin was there, too, looking torn between two worlds. Ron was on the floor, clutching his leg, and Hermione was standing in front of him, her wand shaking. Give me the rat, Ron, Harry said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. Harry, no, Sirius is going to kill us. Ron yelled. The rat, Harry repeated. He didn't wait. He used a non-verbal summoning charm so powerful it tore the floorboards up. Scabbers was yanked from Ron's hands. The rat squealed, transforming midair into a balding, pathetic man. Peter Pettigrew hit the floor, trembling. Harry, please, Pettigrew whimpered. I was your father's friend. I stayed a rat to protect you. Harry didn't look at him with disgust. He looked at him with the cold eyes of a judge. He looked at Sirius Black, whose face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He's the one, Sirius rasped, his voice cracking. He's the one who told, Harry. Not me, never me, I would have died for them. Harry turned his gaze to the shadow inside his mind, to the fragment of Voldemort. He felt the ghost memory of the night in Godric's Hollow. He felt the cold air, the sound of the door breaking, and the smell of the Dark Lord's robes. He searched the memory for a face. He saw Pettigrew, kneeling in the dirt, kissing the hem of the robe. I know, Harry said. He turned back to Pettigrew. The small man was trying to scramble toward the door. Peter Pettigrew, Harry said. You are a variable that has outlived its usefulness. Harry raised his wand. The air in the room began to vibrate. Sirius and Lupin stepped back, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. White room, in Harry's mind was opening, letting the void bleed through. Harry, don't, Hermione cried. Don't be a murderer. Let the Dementors take him. Let the law handle it. The law is a slow, blunt instrument, Harry said. I am a surgical strike. Avada. No. Lupin lunged, grabbing Harry's arm. The spell didn't fire. Instead, Harry's magic backfired, a wave of black force throwing everyone against the walls. The shack groaned, the ancient wood splintering. In the chaos, Pettigrew transformed back into a rat and vanished through a crack in the floor. No, Sirius screamed, trying to give chase, but he was too weak. Harry stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. He looked at Lupin, who was gasping for air on the floor. You let him go, Harry said. You chose a moral high ground over a strategic necessity. Do you have any idea what you've done? I saved your soul, Harry, Lupin wheezed. My soul was bought and paid for a long time ago, Professor, Harry said. He walked out of the shack and into the moonlight. The transformation was starting for Lupin, the crack of bones, the howl of the wolf. Harry didn't stay to watch. He didn't care about the wolf. He cared about the failure. He reached the edge of the lake, where the Dementors were gathering again, sensing the weakness in the air. Hundreds of them. They saw him and hesitated, remembering the pitch. Harry looked at them. He felt the fragment of Voldemort laughing in his head. They are yours to command, little king. Give them the word. Let them feast on the school. Shut up, Harry whispered. He took out the communication sphere. Saul, the acid Pettigrew has escaped. Black is innocent but incapacitated. Lupin is a lunar risk. Requesting immediate extraction. Negative. Subject 7, Croaker's voice was cold. The Ministry has ordered the Dementor's kiss for Black on site. If you interfere, you're a fugitive. Stand down and return to the castle. Harry looked at the Dementors. He looked at the castle in the distance. Where his friends were. I don't stand down, Harry said. He crushed the communication sphere in his hand. He turned to the Dementors and did something that defied every law of magic ever written. He didn't cast a spell. He opened his mind. He lowered the walls of the cage. The fragment of Voldemort surged forward, its dark, ancient power flooding Harry's nervous system. Harry channeled it, mixing it with the void, and projected it outward not as a shield, but as a command. Leave, Harry bellowed. The command wasn't a sound, it was a psychic shockwave. The Dementors didn't just flee. They were blasted across the lake, their forms shattering like glass. Harry fell to his knees, blood pouring from his nose and ears. His vision was tunneling. He saw a silver stag across the water, a Patronus. No, it was a memory. His father. He reached out, his hand trembling. Dad. The stag vanished. There was no one there. Only the cold, the dark, and the crushing weight of Bine. A weapon that had nowhere left to point. When the Ministry arrived, they found Sirius Black gone, Lupin unconscious, and Harry Potter sitting by the lake, staring at the moon with eyes that no longer looked human. The Department of Mysteries had their weapon back. But as they led him away, Saul Croaker noticed something that chilled him more than the veil ever could. Harry wasn't fighting them. He wasn't angry. He was smiling. And in his eyes, the obsidian was winning. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Ballistics of the Blood Bowl. The fourth year at Hogwarts didn't start with a welcome, it started with a warning. The atmosphere in the Great Hall was no longer festive, it was industrial. The Ministry was moving in, their red-robed lackeys pacing the corridors, and the Department of Mystery had increased Harry's check-in frequency to once every 6 hours. The goblet of fire sat in the center of the hall, a rough-hewn cup of ancient wood, belching blue-white flames that smelled of ozone and forgotten oaths. The Triwizard Tournament, Croaker's voice whispered through the new, bone conduction implant behind Harry's ear. It's a relic, Harry. A blood contract masquerading as a sport. Dumbledore thinks it's for international cooperation. We know it's a meat grinder. Someone is going to put my name in, Harry muttered, sitting at the Slytherin table. He was dissecting a piece of teak with a precision that made the younger students uncomfortable. We're counting on it, Croaker replied. The tournament is the perfect cover for a high-level assassination or a ritual extraction. We need to see who bites. You're the bait, Subject 7. Don't disappoint. Harry didn't. When the goblet's flames turned blood red and spat out a fourth piece of parchment, the hall went silent. Dumbledore looked like he had aged another decade in a single second. Harry Potter, the headmaster whispered. Harry stood up. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man clocking into a shift at a factory. He walked toward the back room, the weight of 1,000 accusations pressing against his back. The confrontation in the trophy room was a mess of egos. Ludo Bagman was sweating, Karkaroff was snarling about Durmstrang's honor, and Madame Maxime was looming like a vengeful cloud. He's a child, Maxime thundered. He is too young to compete. Age is a biological metric, Harry said, cutting through the noise. The goblet is an ancient AI designed to identify the most potent magical signatures in a given radius. It didn't pick me because I'm a child. It picked me because I'm the only thing in this room that can survive what's coming. He looked at Moody, Alistair, Mad Eye, Moody. The man's magical eye was spinning wildly, trying to penetrate Harry's occlumency layers. Harry let him see a glimpse, just a fraction of the screaming void. The eye stopped spinning and fixed on the floor. The boy's right, Moody growled, his voice like grinding gravel. The goblet's a binding contract. He plays, or he loses his magic. And in this world, Potter without magic is a dead man. The first task was the dragons. The stadium was packed. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat and adrenaline. Harry stood in the tent, listening to the roars of the Hungarian horntail outside. The other champions were pale, sweating, practicing their shielding charms. Harry sat in the corner, his eyes closed. He was talking to the voice in the cage. It is a magnificent beast, Riddle whispered. A predator of the old world. You could break it, Harry. You could make it yours. I don't want a pet, Tom. Harry thought back. I want the objective. When Harry stepped into the arena, the crowd didn't cheer, they gasped. He wasn't wearing Quidditch leathers. He was wearing his department tactical gear, shimmering, black dragon hide that seemed to absorb the light. He didn't have a broom. The horntail roared, a jet of yellow-orange flame erupting from its maw. The heat was enough to melt lead. Harry didn't move. He raised his hand, his fingers splayed. Terminus, he whispered. The fire didn't hit him. It hit an invisible wall of absolute zero. The flames didn't just stop. They fell to the ground as frozen, crystalline shards, shattering like glass. Harry walked forward, the ground under his boots turning to frost. The dragon lunged, its spiked tail swinging with enough force to level a tower. Harry didn't dodge. He used a micro-burst of the black smoke, flickering 10 feet into the air. He landed on the dragon's snout. The beast bucked, but Harry's boots were anchored by localized gravity charms. He looked into the dragon's massive, slit pupil eye. You're outmatched, Harry said. He didn't use a spell. He used the void. He touched the dragon's scales. And the creature's fire breath died in its throat. He siphoned just enough of its heat to leave it lethargic, a biological battery being drained by a superior predator. Harry reached down, picked up the golden egg, and walked out. The task had taken 3 minutes. The second task was the lake. Harry didn't bother with gillyweed. He didn't bother with bubble head charms. He walked into the water, and let the weight of his own core sink him to the bottom. He didn't need to breathe. He had a department-issue rebreather integrated into his throat, a gift from the medical wing. He moved through the dark water like a shark. When the Grindylows attacked, he didn't fight them. He projected a subsonic frequency of pure terror that sent them screaming into the silt. He reached the merpeople's village and saw the hostages. Ron, Hermione, Cho Chang. He looked at Hermione. She was suspended in the water, her hair floating like a cloud of brown silk. For a split second, the white room in his mind flickered. He saw her not as a variable, but as a person. The girl is a weakness, Riddle hissed. Leave her. Take the boy. Prove you are beyond them. Harry reached out and sliced the ropes holding both Ron and Hermione. He didn't care about the rules. He grabbed them both and ignited a directional blast of magical kinetic energy from his feet. They breached the surface like a missile. As he hauled them onto the dock, Hermione coughed, her eyes snapping open. She looked at Harry, dripping wet, his eyes cold and black, and she didn't thank him. She looked terrified. Harry, she whispered, you didn't even look at the others. You looked like you were harvesting us. I was securing the assets, Hermione, Harry said, his voice flat. Don't confuse the rescue for a sentiment. The third task was the maze. The hedges were 60 feet high, moving and shifting like a living organism. Harry entered first, his wand held in a low ready position. He didn't look for the path, he looked for the center. He encountered a sphinx. It offered a riddle. I have no voice, but I scream. I have no heart, but I beat. What am I? Harry didn't answer. He raised his wand. You're a biological construct guarding a doorway. Move, or I'll deconstruct you. The sphinx didn't move. Harry fired a beam of concentrated void energy that tore a hole through the creature's chest. It didn't bleed, it evaporated into sand. He reached the center of the maze and found Cedric Diggory. The Hufflepuff was battered, his robes torn, but he was reaching for the Triwizard Cup. "Cedric, stop," Harry yelled. He felt it, the ripple in the wards. The cup wasn't a trophy, it was a long-range portkey, and its destination was outside the Hogwarts protection zone. "We take it together, Harry," Cedric shouted, his hand inches from the silver handles. "For the school. It's a trap, you idiot." Harry lunged, trying to tackle Cedric, but he was too late. Both boys grabbed the cup at the same time. The world spun, gravity inverted. They slammed into the ground of a desolate, overgrown graveyard. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and ancient blood. A massive, crumbling tombstone stood nearby, the name Riddle carved into the stone. "Where are we?" Cedric asked, shaking. "Get back to the cup, Cedric," Harry roared, his wand out. From the shadows, a small, hooded figure emerged, carrying a bundle of rags that pulsed with a sickening dark energy. "Peter Pettigrew, kill the spare," a high, cold voice whispered from the rags. "Avada Kedavra," Pettigrew shrieked. The green light lit up the graveyard. Harry moved, not to save himself, but to shove Cedric. The spell grazed Cedric's shoulder, sending him spinning into the dirt, unconscious but alive. "Harry Potter," Pettigrew whimpered, his silver hand shaking. "The boy who lived, come to die." Pettigrew didn't wait. He forced Harry against the Riddle tombstone using a powerful binding curse. Harry struggled, but the stone itself seemed to come alive. The carved marble hands of a statue pinning him in place. "Blood of the enemy, forcibly taken, you will resurrect your foe," Pettigrew chanted. He stepped forward with a jagged dagger. He sliced Harry's forearm. Harry didn't scream. He watched his blood, dark, almost black, drip into a massive stone cauldron. The ritual was a symphony of necro-alchemy. Bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy. The cauldron erupted in a pillar of white steam and black flame. Out of the muck stepped a figure, tall, skeletally thin, with skin the color of a blanched bone and eyes that burned like embers in a furnace. Lord Voldemort had returned. He breathed in the night air, his nostrils slitting. He looked at his hands, then at Harry. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said, his voice a sibilant caress. "You've grown. I can feel the change in you. You smell like the department. You smell like the void. I smell like your funeral, Tom," Harry spat. Voldemort laughed, a high, old sound that echoed off the tombstones. He summoned his Death Eaters, masks appearing in the dark, figures kneeling in the dirt. "Lucius Malfoy, Avery, not my friends," Voldemort said. "Behold, the boy who was supposed to be my end. See how he is bound. See how his great power fails him." Voldemort turned back to Harry. "They say you are a weapon now. That the unspeakables have turned you into something beyond a wizard. Let us test that theory. Let us see if the void can stand against the Master of Death." Voldemort waved his wand, breaking Harry's bonds. "Pick up your wand, Potter. I want there to be no doubt. I want the world to see you fall." Harry stood up. He felt the fragment in his head screaming in triumph. He felt the void in his chest cold and ready. He didn't pick up his wand immediately. He looked at Voldemort. "You think this is a duel?" Harry asked. "You think we're playing by the old rules?" "I am the rules," Voldemort hissed. Harry reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, lead-lined box. He opened it. Inside was a single, humming crystal, the core of a time-turner that had been purposefully overloaded. "The department doesn't play fair, Tom," Harry said. "They play to win." Harry crushed the crystal in his bare hand. Time didn't stop. It shattered. The graveyard became a kaleidoscope of overlapping moments. Voldemort fired the killing curse, but the green light moved in slow motion. Frozen in a sea of amber light, Harry moved through the fractured seconds. He was a blur of black smoke and silvered skin. He appeared in front of Voldemort, his bone white wand pressed against the Dark Lord's chest. "Nulla spatium," Harry whispered. An explosion of pure spatial displacement rocked the graveyard. It wasn't a spell, it was a localized collapse of the dimensions. Voldemort was thrown back, his physical form flickering like a bad holofeed. The time shards cut through the Death Eaters, trapping them in loops of their own screams. But Voldemort was strong. He anchored himself to the earth using the dark blood he had stolen from Harry. He fought through the chronal storm, his face contorting with rage. "You little brat," Voldemort roared. He lunged, his hand catching Harry's throat. The contact was like two stars colliding. The piece of Voldemort inside Harry's head tried to tear its way out, while the Voldemort in front of him tried to crush his windpipe. Harry looked Voldemort in the eye. "You wanted my blood," Harry rasped. "Take the rest of it." Harry let the void go. He opened every gate in his mind. He let the cage break. The feedback was catastrophic. A pillar of black light shot into the sky, visible for 100 miles. The graveyard was leveled, the trees turned to ash, the tombstones pulverized into dust. When the light faded, Voldemort was gone. He hadn't died, his Horcruxes wouldn't allow that, but his new body had been shredded, reduced to a spectral mist that fled into the dark. Harry lay in the center of the crater. His clothes were gone, his skin was scorched, and his eyes were bleeding. Cedric Diggory crawled toward him, his face covered in soot. "Harry, Harry, talk to me." Harry looked at the sky. He felt empty. The fragment of Riddle in his head was silent, suppressed by the sheer trauma of the explosion. The void was quiet. "He's back, Cedric," Harry whispered. "We have to go. Now." Cedric grabbed the cup, which was lying a few feet away. He grabbed Harry's hand. The portkey activated. They landed on the grass outside the maze. The crowd cheered, the band started playing, and the lights were blinding. But the cheers died when they saw the boys. Dumbledore ran forward, his face a mask of horror. He looked at the cratered remains of the Triwizard Cup, then at Harry. "He's back," Harry said, his voice carrying over the silent crowd. "And I'm the one who let him in." Harry passed out. The Department of Mysteries had their war. The weapon had been fired, and the world was burning. But as old Croaker watched from the shadows of the Ullery, he knew the truth. The weapon wasn't just broken. It was starting to think for itself. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The Jurisprudence of the Abyss. The recovery wing of the Department of Mysteries had been upgraded to a high-security containment cell. Harry didn't lie in a bed, he hovered 3 inches above a block of cold, etched lapis lazuli, his body suspended in a stasis field designed to bleed off the excess chronal radiation. His skin was no longer pale, it was a translucent, shifting gray, the veins beneath his surface glowing with a faint, pulsing violet light. "He's becoming a temporal anomaly," the director whispered, standing behind the thick, reinforced glass of the observation deck. The explosion in the graveyard didn't just destroy Voldemort's physical shell. It cracked Subject 7's anchor to this dimension. Saul Croaker didn't look at the director. He looked at Harry. He saw the way the boy's fingers twitched, not in a rhythm, but in a sequence that defied the linear flow of time. "He's not an anomaly. He's a bridge. He's bridging the gap between what we know and the veil. If we pull him out now, we lose the weapon. If we leave him in, we lose the boy." The boy was an acceptable loss the moment he survived the killing curse, the director said coldly. "We need to know what happened in that graveyard. The pensieve won't take his memories. They're too fragmented, too distorted by the void." Inside the stasis field, Harry wasn't sleeping. He was walking through a landscape made of shattered glass and screaming voices. He was in the white room, but the walls were melting. The cage was gone. In its place was a mirror, and in the mirror stood Tom Riddle, not the snake-faced monster, but the boy from the chamber, and the man from the graveyard. And 1,000 other versions of the same rot. "You felt it, didn't you?" The collective voice of Riddle hissed. "When our blood mixed, when the void touched the Horcrux. We aren't enemies, Harry. We are the two ends of a collapsing star. You are the gravity, and I am the fire." "You're a parasite," Harry's mental projection replied. "And I'm the cure, a cure that kills the patient." Riddle laughed. "Look at your hands, Harry. You aren't human anymore. You're a collection of variables held together by the Ministry's desperate will. They're afraid of me, yes. But they are terrified of you." Harry opened his eyes in the real world. The stasis field shattered. The lapis lazuli block cracked down the center, and the glass of the observation deck spider webbed under the sheer pressure of his consciousness returning to his body. He dropped to the floor, landing in a crouch. He didn't look at the director. He looked at Croaker. "The Ministry is going to try me," Harry said, his voice a dry rasp that sounded like stone grinding on stone. "What?" Croaker asked, stepping through the ruined glass. "The Wizengamot, fudge. They're terrified," Harry said, standing up. His robes were tattered, but he didn't feel the cold. "They can't admit Voldemort is back because that means they've failed. So they'll blame the explosion on me. They'll call me a danger to public safety. They'll try to snap my wand and send me to Azkaban. They wouldn't dare," the director barked. "You're a department asset." "I'm an asset that just leveled a graveyard and returned with a dead man's story," Harry said, his eyes flashing obsidian. Fudge is already drafting the warrant. I can hear the ink scratching on the parchment 3 floors up. My hearing isn't just biological anymore, Saul. I'm tuned to the frequency of the building. The director's communication stone flared red. He pressed it to his ear, listened for 3 seconds, and went pale. The minister is on level 9. He has a squad of hit wizards and a Dementor escort. He's claiming jurisdiction under the Emergency Powers Act. He's coming for me, Harry said. A dark, jagged smirk touched his lips. Let him, Harry. No, Croaker warned. Reaching for his wand. If you fight the ministry, you prove them right. You'll be a fugitive. I've been a prisoner of the dark for 10 years, Saul, Harry said, walking toward the heavy vault doors. I think I'm ready for a change of scenery. The doors exploded outward before the hit wizards could even set their breaching charms. Harry stepped into the corridor. The black smoke of his core billowing around him like a royal mantle. Cornelius Fudge stood at the back of the squad, his bowler hat trembling in his hands. Next to him was a woman in a pink car. Deegan, who looked like a toad, Dolores Umbridge. She was holding a scroll with the ministry seal. Harry Potter, Fudge squealed, his voice echoing in the stone hallway. You are under arrest for the use of restricted chronal magic, the destruction of a historical site, and the suspected practice of necromancy. Cornelius, Harry said, his voice dropping into that terrifying, dual-tone bass. You, standing in a graveyard of your own making. You think your laws have weight here? In the Department of Mysteries. This is where the laws of physics come to die. What makes you think your statutes stand a chance? Seize him, Umbridge shrieked. The hit wizards fired. A dozen stupefy and incarcerous spells streaked through the air. Harry didn't move. He didn't shield. He let the spells hit the black smoke. They didn't bounce off. They were absorbed, the light of the magic turning black as it was neutralized by the void. Harry raised his hand. My turn. He didn't use a wand. He snapped his fingers. The gravity in the corridor inverted. The hit wizards slammed into the ceiling, their wands falling to the floor. Fudge and Umbridge were pinned against the wall, the air being squeezed out of their lungs. Harry walked toward them, his boots clicking on the stone. He stopped in front of Fudge, who was hyperventilating. Voldemort is back, Harry whispered. He's weak, he's a ghost, but he's back. He's going to spend the next year gathering his strength, and while he does that, you're going to be busy trying to pretend I'm the villain. You're a monster. Fudge wheezed. I'm the monster you built, Harry corrected. He turned to Umbridge. He saw the cold, calculated cruelty in her eyes, a different kind of dark than his own. He reached out and touched her forehead. She screamed. Med as a vision of the veil flooded her mind, the absolute, crushing silence of the end. Harry pulled back, and she collapsed into a heap, her eyes wide and vacant. Harry, stop. Dumbledore appeared at the end of the hall. He didn't use a portkey, he had simply stepped through the space between. He looked at the hid wizards on the ceiling, then at Harry. This is not the way, Harry, Dumbledore said, his voice full of a weary authority. If you do this, you lose the people. You lose the world you're meant to protect. The world doesn't want protection, Albus. It wants comfort, Harry said, letting the gravity return to normal. The hit wizards fell to the floor in a tangled mess of limbs. I'm going back to Hogwarts. Not as your student, and not as your savior. I'm going back to find the rest of the shards. Voldemort has Horcruxes. That's why he didn't die. Dumbledore's eyes sharpened. The secret he had kept for years had been torn open by the boy in the dark. How do you know that word? Because the piece of him in my head won't stop bragging about them, Harry said. He walked past Fudge, who was sobbing, and stopped next to Dumbledore. The department is no longer my home. But the school isn't either. I'm operating on my own frequency now. If you want to help me, find the ring. If you want to stay out of my way, keep the ministry off my back. And if I can't? Dumbledore asked. Harry looked back at the ministry officials, his eyes two pits of infinite shadow. Then I'll treat them like any other variable that refuses to balance. I'll delete them. Harry vanished into a cloud of black smoke, leaving the ministry in shambles. The 5th year at Hogwarts was a siege. The ministry sent Umbridge to the school as the High Inquisitor, but she was a shell of a woman, her mind fractured by Harry's touch. She sat in the Great Hall, staring at nothing, while the school descended into a cold, silent war. Harry didn't attend classes. He moved through the castle like a predator, searching for the resonance of the next Horcrux. He found it in the room of requirement, a tiara, hidden under a pile of junk. Ravenclaw's diadem. He stood before it, his bone-white wand humming. Harry, What are you doing? It was Hermione. She had followed him, her face thin and stressed. She was the only one who still tried to talk to him. Ron had stopped months ago, terrified of the way Harry's presence made the lights flicker. I'm ending a legacy, Hermione, Harry said. That's a relic. It's Ravenclaw's, she cried, looking at the diadem. You can't just destroy history. History is just a record of people who didn't have the guts to finish what they started, Harry said. He didn't hesitate. He summoned a stream of fiendfire, but it wasn't orange. It was a sickly, pale violet, a void-infused flame that didn't just burn, it erased. The diadem screamed, a high, soul-piercing sound, as the fragment of Voldemort was consumed. Harry turned to Hermione. She was crying. You're scaring me, Harry, she whispered. I don't recognize you anymore. You don't even laugh. You don't even look at us. Harry walked over to her. He wanted to reach out, to tell her that he was doing this for her, for everyone. But when he looked at his hand, he saw the smoke clinging to his skin. He saw the weapon. You're right to be scared, Hermione, Harry said softly. The boy you knew is a ghost. Ghosts don't have anything left to lose. He walked out of the room, leaving the ashes of the diadem behind. He had 3 shards left. The cup, the locket, the snake, and the one in his own head. War was no longer about light and dark. It was about the boy from the Department of Mysteries and the man who wouldn't die, both of them racing toward a final, silent conclusion in the dark. And deep in the Ministry, in the heart of the Death Chamber, the veil began to flutter faster. It was calling its firstborn home. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The Ballistics of the Black Heart. The atmosphere in the Great Hall had reached a state of terminal stasis. Above, the enchanted ceiling was no longer a reflection of the Scottish sky, it was a mirror of Harry's internal landscape, a swirling, lightle abyss that made the students eat in a hurried, terrified silence. Dolores Umbridge sat at the high table, a vegetable in pink tweed. She didn't blink, she didn't speak, she just tracked Harry with eyes that were hollowed out by the void. Dumbledore sat beside her, his hand blackened and withered, the price of his own hunt for the Horcruxes. The ring, Albus, Harry said, not looking up from his seat at the Slytherin table. His voice didn't carry, yet it resonated in Dumbledore's mind like a funeral bell. You found it, and it almost killed you because you still think like a man who wants to see his family again. In this game, sentiment is a fatal error. Dumbledore's eyes flickered toward Harry. It was a moment of weakness, Harry. One I hope you never have to understand. I don't have moments, Albus. I have intervals of efficiency, Harry replied. The peace of the castle was shattered 3 nights later. The wards, those ancient, crumbling masterpieces of magical engineering, didn't just fail, they were bypassed. A breach occurred in the heart of the astronomy tower. The Death Eaters had arrived. They didn't come with a frontal assault. They came like a virus. Bellatrix Lestrange led the pack, her laughter a jagged shard of glass in the quiet night. She wanted the boy, she wanted the Void Prince, who had humiliated her master in the graveyard. Harry met them in the entrance hall. He stood alone, his black tactical robes absorbing the torchlight. Behind him, the students were being ushered into the great hall by a frantic McGonagall. Potter, Bellatrix shrieked, her wand dancing in her hand. The Dark Lord says you're special. He says you've got a little bit of him inside that pretty little head. I think I'll cut it out and see for myself. Bellatrix Lestrange, Harry said, his voice a flat, terrifying monotone, psychotic, impulsive, and magically overextended. You're a high-noise variable. I'm going to enjoy silencing you. Crucio. The red light of the torture curse slammed into Harry's chest. The students watching from the balcony screamed. But Harry didn't fall. He didn't even flinch. He stood there, the red energy crawling over his skin like harmless static. He had spent years in the department's pain rooms. He had been subjected to the cruciatus by machines that didn't have a limit on their cruelty. Bellatrix's rage was a candlelight compared to the sun of the department's methodology. Is that it? Harry asked. He raised his hand. No wand, just a gesture of absolute dismissal. Vectus. The kinetic energy in the room inverted. The Death Eaters weren't thrown back. They were pulled forward, their bodies slamming into an invisible focal point 3 feet in front of Harry. They were a mess of tangled limbs and breaking bones, pinned by a gravitational well that Harry was feeding with his own core. Bellatrix gasped, her ribs cracking under the pressure. What are you? I'm the thing your master is afraid of, Harry said. He reached out and gripped the air. The gravitational well tightened. The Death Eaters screamed as their armor and bones began to compress. Harry, stop. Hermione ran onto the floor, her wand out but lowered. You're killing them. You can't just execute them in the hallway. They came here to slaughter children, Hermione, Harry said, not looking at her. I am merely adjusting the probability of their success to 0. This isn't justice, it's murder. Justice is a human construct, Harry said, his eyes turning a solid, lightless obsidian. I am a natural law. And nature doesn't negotiate with predators. A sudden, green flare of light erupted from the shadows of the marble staircase. The killing curse. It didn't come from Bellatrix. It came from the back of the pack. Harry flickered. He didn't move. He simply wasn't there when the spell passed through the space he had occupied. He reappeared 10 feet to the left, his bone-white wand finally in his hand. Lucius, Harry noted, looking at the elder Malfoy who was trembling in the shadows. Your aim is deteriorating. Too much time spent in the Ministry's pockets, not enough time in the dirt. Before Harry could finish the purge, a cold, oily presence flooded the hall. The temperature dropped 40 degrees. The torches flickered and died, leaving only the pale, sickly light of the moon. Voldemort had arrived. He wasn't in a body this time. He was a swirling mass of black smoke and screaming faces, a semi-corporeal nightmare that hovered above his broken followers. My Harry, the smoke hissed, the voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. See how they fear you. See how even the mudblood looks at you with disgust. You belong to the dark. You belong to the end. I belong to no one, Tom, Harry said, raising his wand. You have my soul in your head. You are my final Horcrux. You cannot kill me without killing yourself. The hall went deathly silent. Hermione's gasp was the only sound. Dumbledore, who had just arrived at the top of the stairs, closed his eyes in a gesture of profound defeat. I know, Harry said. He didn't look shocked. He didn't look sad. The department figured it out when I was 9, Harry continued, his voice echoing in the hollow space. They didn't tell me because they wanted me to be the weapon that fired the final shot. They knew I'd have to die to win. And I accepted that. But here's the thing, Tom. Harry stepped toward the swirling mass of the Dark Lord. You think being a Horcrux makes me your servant. But in the department, we don't believe in masters. We believe in containment. I haven't been living with a piece of your soul. I've been digesting it. Harry slammed his wand into the floor. Abyssus. An eruption of pure void energy exploded from Harry's core. It wasn't a blast, it was a vacuum. The swirling smoke of Voldemort was sucked toward Harry, drawn into the cage he had built in his mind. The Dark Lord shrieked, a sound of such visceral agony that several students fainted. The black smoke was torn apart, thread by thread, and pulled into the boy's chest. Harry's body began to fracture. Cracks of violet light appeared on his skin, his face, his neck, his hands. He was a vessel being filled with too much pressure. Harry, no, you'll explode, Dumbledore roared, lunging forward with his wand raised to provide a containment shield. Stay back, Albus, Harry yelled, his voice sounding like a choir of the dead. I'm taking him with me. I'm taking it all. The feedback was blinding. A shockwave of white noise and black light leveled the entrance hall, earing the hourglasses of the 4 houses. Rubies, emeralds, and sapphires rained down like blood and ice. When the light faded, the entrance hall was a ruin. The Death Eaters had fled in the chaos. Voldemort's presence was gone. Harry lay in the center of the wreckage. He wasn't moving. Hermione was the first to reach him. She fell to her knees, her hands hovering over his scorched chest. Harry, please, breathe, just breathe. Harry's eyes opened. They were no longer obsidian. They were a dull, dead gray. It's contained, Harry whispered, a mouthful of blood staining his teeth. The parasite is offline. But at what cost? Dumbledore asked, kneeling on the other side. He looked at Harry's chest. The scar on his forehead was gone, replaced by a smooth, unblemished patch of skin. But the cracks on his body remained, glowing with a faint, dying light. The cost was the mission, Albus, Harry said, his voice fading. I'm no longer a weapon. I'm just a ghost in a broken shell. He closed his eyes. Saul Croaker appeared from the shadows, his face a mask of clinical detachment that hid a world of grief. He looked at the boy who had been his project, his ward, and his only hope. Extraction team is on the way, Croaker said. He's not going back to your basement, Saul, Dumbledore said, his voice like iron. He's done. The weapon is spent. The weapon is never spent until the war is over, Albus. Croaker replied. And look at the boy. He's not dead, he's evolving. He just ate the soul of the most powerful dark wizard in history. You think he's going to just wake up and want to play Quidditch? Croaker looked at Hermione, who was still holding Harry's hand. Get her away from him, Croaker ordered. Before the radiation starts to peel her skin off. The unspeakables moved in, their gray robes shimmering in the moonlight. They lifted Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the weapon of the dark, the devourer of souls, and vanished into the night. The war had shifted. Voldemort was a prisoner in the mind of a boy who had been raised to know no mercy. The Department of Mysteries had their ultimate prize. But as the castle of Hogwarts sat in a stunned, mourning silence, one question remained. When the weapon wakes up, who will it be aiming at? End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Thermodynamics of Rebirth. The Silence Level. It was a sector of the Department of Mysteries that didn't exist on any map. Buried 300 feet below the Death Chamber. There was no air here, only a pressurized magical atmosphere that kept Harry's lungs from collapsing. He was suspended in a vertical tank of heavy water, liquid memories harvested from the long dead, designed to act as a psychic coolant for a mind that was currently a nuclear furnace. Inside Harry's head, the containment was failing. He had eaten the soul of Voldemort, but a soul is not a thing that can be digested easily. It was a jagged, sentient poison. In the dark of his subconscious, Harry stood in a sea of black ink. Opposite him sat Tom Riddle, stripped of his monstrous form, looking once again like the handsome, hollow-eyed boy from the 1940s. You are dying, Harry, Riddle said, his voice echoing in the void. Your biology was designed to hold a fragment, not the whole. You've swallowed a star, and now you're going supernova. The unspeakables are watching your vitals. They're already discussing how to harvest your remains when you pop. Let them discuss, Harry replied. His mental form was flickering, his edges blurred by static. I've spent my life as their experiment. If I go out, I am taking the department's foundation with me. Why die for people who see you as a ledger entry? Riddle leaned forward, his eyes burning with a reflected violet light. Merge with me, truly. Don't cage me, integrate me. You're void, my fire. We could stop being the weapon and start being the hand that swings it. You want the Horcruxes, I can show you the cup. I can show you the locket. I can show you the path to the end. The price is my humanity, Harry said. Look around you, kid, Riddle sneered, using Harry's own slang against him. That ship didn't just sail, it sank in the middle of the Atlantic. You haven't been human since the day Saul Croaker taught you how to stop a heart with a thought. In the physical world, the alarm sirens began to howl. The heavy water in the tank began to boil. He's spiking, Bode screamed, his hands flying over a console of glowing runes. The neural pressure is hitting 900 psi. If he doesn't vent the energy now, level 9 is going to be a crater. Saul Croaker stood at the glass, his face inches from the boiling liquid. He saw Harry's eyes snap open. They weren't gray, and they weren't black. They were a blinding, incandescent white. Harry, listen to my voice. Croaker roared into the intercom. Don't fight the intake, shift the frequency. You're the bridge, remember. Be the bridge. The tank exploded. The heavy water didn't just spill, it vaporized instantly. A shockwave of pure psychic residue slammed into the unspeakables, knocking them unconscious. When the steam cleared, the silence level was covered in a layer of fine, silver frost. Harry stood in the center of the ruin. He was naked, his skin etched with glowing violet circuits that looked like a map of a city that didn't exist. He didn't look tired. He looked calibrated. He reached out and grabbed a gray robe from a fallen medic, wrapping it around himself with a casual, predatory grace. He walked over to Croaker, who was struggling to sit up, blood leaking from his nose. The merger is complete, Saul, Harry said. His voice was no longer a dual tone, it was a single, terrifyingly clear resonance that made the air vibrate. Tom is no longer a guest. He's a subsystem, Harry, Croaker gasped, squinting at the light radiating from the boy. I know where the cup is, Harry said. It's in Gringotts, the Lestrange vault, and I know where the locket is. It's in a cave by the sea, guarded by a lake of the dead. We need to prep a team, Croaker wheezed. No team, Harry said. He looked at his hand. The violet glow faded into his skin, leaving him looking unnervingly normal, save for the fact that he was floating 2 inches off the floor. Teams are for people who can't handle the variables. I'm going to Gringotts, and then I'm going to the cave. And then, I'm going to find the snake. You're going rogue, Croaker realized, his voice trembling. The director will activate the kill switch in your implant. Harry smiled. It was a beautiful, terrifying expression. He tapped the back of his ear. A small, metallic spark flickered and died. I deconstructed the kill switch while I was boiling in the tank, Saul. It was a simple matter of reversing the polarity of the neural gate. I'm not your asset anymore. I'm the end of the war. Harry turned and walked toward the elevator. The doors didn't open for him, they simply ceased to exist as he approached. The metal unraveling into atoms. Gringotts Bank was a fortress of gold and goblin spite. It was built to withstand a siege, but it wasn't built to withstand a singularity. Harry walked through the front doors at high noon. The goblins behind the counters stopped their counting. The wizards in the lobby froze. There was an aura around Harry, a sense of impending finality that made the lizard brains of everyone in the room scream for flight. I need access to the Lestrange vault, Harry said to the head teller. The Lestrange family has not authorized. Harry didn't let him finish. He didn't use a wand. He leaned over the counter and looked the goblin in the eye. I am not asking for authorization. I am informing you of a repossession. You can either open the door, or I can remove the entire mountain from the map. The goblin's sneer died. He saw the white fire behind Harry's pupils. He saw the way the marble floor was beginning to smoke under Harry's feet. Follow me, the goblin whispered. The descent into the vaults was a blur of stone and cold air. They reached the Lestrange vault, protected by a dragon, a blind, scarred Ukrainian ironbelly. The beast roared, sensing a trespasser. Harry walked up to the dragon. He didn't fight it, he placed a hand on its snout. You've spent your life in the dark, serving masters who don't know your name. Go, be free in the mountains. The dragon's chains shattered as if they were made of glass. The beast looked at Harry, let out a low, rumbling huff of gratitude, and charged toward the surface, tearing through the ceiling of the bank. Harry stepped into the vault. It was piled high with gold, but it was all cursed, Gemino and Flagranti. Touch one thing, and the vault would burn and bury you. Child's play, Harry muttered. He closed his eyes and hummed a single, low note. The vibration moved through the room, identifying the specific magical signature of the Horcrux. He walked straight to a small gold cup embossed with a badger. Hufflepuff's cup. He picked it up. The gold glowed red-hot, trying to sear his flesh, but Harry's skin was already at a higher temperature than the curse. He held the cup in both hands and squeezed. The Horcrux shrieked, a sound that echoed through the deep caverns of Gringotts. Black smoke erupted from the metal, trying to find a host, but Harry simply inhaled the smoke, adding it to the subsystem within his mind. The cup fell to the floor, a twisted piece of useless tin. Two left, Harry whispered. He didn't take the stairs out. He looked up at the hole the dragon had made and launched himself into the sky. A streak of violet light that cut through the London fog. The cave by the sea was a place of ancient, stagnant magic. Harry landed on the jagged rocks, the salt spray hitting his face. He felt the cold, the rot, and the thousands of inferi waiting beneath the black water of the underground lake. He walked into the heart of the cavern. The boat was there, waiting for a price of blood. Harry didn't use the boat. He walked across the surface of the water, the liquid freezing into a path of obsidian glass under his feet. He reached the island in the center. The basin was filled with a shimmering green potion, the drink of despair. Dumbledore would have drank this, Harry said to the empty air. He would have suffered for it. He would have asked for death. Harry didn't drink. He reached into the basin, his hand plunging into the toxic liquid. He felt the hallucinations trying to take hold, the screams of his mother, the face of Sirius falling through the veil, the cold eyes of Saul Croaker. Static, Harry said, nothing more. He gripped the bottom of the basin and pulled. The locket of Slytherin came out, dripping with the green sludge. Harry didn't open it, he simply pulsed a wave of void energy through his arm. The locket shattered, the soul fragment within it crushed before it could even scream. He dropped the remains into the lake. Suddenly, the water erupted. Thousands of white, shriveled hands reached for him. The inferi were rising, their dead eyes fixed on the intruder. Harry didn't draw his wand. He looked at the army of the dead. You've been waiting for a king, Harry said, his voice booming in the cave. I'm not a king, I'm the end of the line. Go back to the dust. He clapped his hands together. The resulting sonic boom didn't just push the inferi back. It disintegrated them. The shockwave turned the lake to steam and the stone walls to dust. When the echo died, the cave was empty. Harry stepped out onto the cliffs. The sun was setting, casting a blood-red light over the horizon. He felt the final connection. The snake, Nagini. She was at Hogwarts, with the remnants of the Death Eaters. But he felt something else, too. Team of unspeakables had landed on the cliff behind him. They were led by the director himself. 20 of them, their wands leveled, their faces hidden by silver masks. Subject 7, the director said. You have exceeded your parameters. You are a danger to the stability of the magical world. You will submit to memory erasure and recontainment, or you will be terminated. Harry didn't even turn around. He looked at the ocean. The magical world isn't stable, director. It's a rotting house built on a foundation of lies. I'm just the one who's finally knocking it down. Fire, the director ordered. 20 killing curses streaked toward Harry's back. Harry didn't dodge. He turned, and as the green light reached him, he caught the spells. Not with a shield, but with his bare hands, the gray energy swirling around his fingers like captured lightning. You taught me that the killing curse is the ultimate expression of will, Harry said, his eyes glowing with that terrifying, celestial white. But your will is small. It's based on fear. Mine is based on the void. He threw the green light back. It didn't kill the unspeakables, it hit their wands, shattering them into splinters. Go back to your basement, director, Harry said, stepping into the air. Tell the world that the Department of Mysteries has failed. The weapon is no longer in the cage. Harry vanished, a streak of light heading north. Toward the school, toward the end of the game. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The kinetics of a collapsing star. The skyline of Hogwarts was no longer a silhouette of education, it was a fortress under a localized apocalypse. The sky above the towers had curdled into a bruised, rhythmic purple, swirling around a central vortex where the ley lines of Scotland met the raw, unrefined power of Harry Potter's approach. Harry didn't land, he impacted. He struck the center of the stone bridge, the shockwave of his arrival sending a longitudinal ripple through the masonry that blew out every window in the west wing. He stood in the crater, the violet circuitry on his skin glowing so brightly it cast shadows in the midday sun. The castle didn't welcome him. It groaned. The stones, ancient and semi-sentient, recognized the thing that had walked its halls as a boy and returned as a god-tier anomaly. Harry, Neville Longbottom stood at the far end of the bridge, clutching the sword of Gryffindor. He looked like a soldier who had been through a meat grinder, bloodied, soot-stained, and shaking with a cocktail of adrenaline and terror. Behind him, a line of students and teachers stood ready for a final stand. Stand aside, Neville, Harry said. His voice didn't travel through the air, it vibrated through the atoms of the bridge. The snake is inside. I can smell the rot from here. The Death Eaters are everywhere, Harry. Voldemort, the mist thing, it took over Snape. It's using him as a battery. Neville shouted, his knuckles white on the hilt of the sword. Dumbledore is down. He's alive, but he's drained. You can't go in there alone. I've been alone since the department took me from the cradle, Neville, Harry said, walking forward. Every step he took left a scorched, glass-fused footprint on the stone. I'm not here to save the school. I'm here to balance the equation. A swarm of Death Eaters erupted from the Great Hall doors, led by Fenrir Greyback. They saw Harry, a lone figure in a tattered gray robe, glowing like a dying star, and they didn't hesitate. They fired a volley of dark curses, a rain of purple and green light. Harry didn't draw a wand. He didn't even raise his hands. Static, he whispered. The incoming spells hit an invisible barrier 10 feet from him and simply stopped. They didn't dissipate. They froze in midair, their kinetic energy converted into potential energy. Harry reached out and swiped his hand through the air, as if clearing a cobweb. The frozen spells turned black, inverted their trajectories, and accelerated at 10 times their original speed. The Death Eaters didn't even have time to scream. The reflected magic tore through their shields and their bodies, turning the bridge into a corridor of ash. Greyback was thrown over the side, his howling lost in the roar of the wind. Harry entered the Great Hall. The room was a nightmare. The house tables had been smashed to splinters. In the center, a massive, black, scaled serpent, Nagini, coiled around the high table. Standing over her was Severus Snape, but it wasn't the man Harry knew. Snape's skin was a sickly, translucent gray, and his eyes were glowing with the red, manic fire of Voldemort's possession. Subject 7, the Snape-Voldemort hybrid hissed, the voice a chorus of 1,000 dying men. You've come to join the feast. I can feel the brothers I lost inside you. The cup, the locket, You've brought them home. They aren't home, Tom, Harry said, his obsidian eyes fixing on the snake. They're deleted. And you're the last bit of corrupted data. You cannot kill me without killing the vessel. Voldemort roared, raising the Elder Wand, stolen from Dumbledore's unconscious form. I will bleed this man dry to keep my soul anchored. Voldemort fired a beam of pure, concentrated entropy. It wasn't a killing curse, it was a spell designed to unravel the molecular bonds of anything it touched. Harry met the beam with his bare hand. The hall screamed. The air turned to ozone. Harry's hand began to char, the skin peeling back to reveal the violet-white light beneath. He didn't flinch. He pushed back, his feet grinding into the stone floor, as he forced the beam of entropy back toward its source. You're still thinking in terms of magic, Tom. Harry bellowed, his voice cracking the remaining rafters. The department taught me that magic is just a cheat code for physics. And I've mastered the source code. Harry lunged. He moved faster than the human eye could process, a blink step that bypassed the three-dimensional space between him and the high table. He appeared behind the snake. Nagini lunged, her fangs dripping with a neurotoxin that could kill a giant. Harry caught her mid-strike, his hands sinking into the scales of her neck. Vectus. Collapsus. Harry didn't use a sword. He used a localized gravitational collapse. The space inside Nagini's neck vanished. The snake's head was severed not by a blade, but by the fact at the space it occupied no longer existed. The final Horcrux was gone. A psychic explosion rocked the castle. The fragment of Voldemort inside Snape shrieked, the soul shard trying to flee the dying host. Snape collapsed, his body smoking, as the red mist of the Dark Lord's essence spiraled into the air, desperate and frantic. No more running, Harry said. He opened his mouth and performed a forced inhalation, a void draw. The red mist was sucked into Harry's lungs, joining the subsystem of the other shards. Harry fell to his knees. His body was a war zone. 5 soul shards were now fighting. G for dominance within a single human nervous system. His skin began to tear, blinding white light leaking from the wounds. He was a human bomb with a 1-second fuse. Harry. Hermione was there. She had bypassed the fighting. Her face covered in blood and tears. She reached for him, but the heat coming off his skin was enough to melt the stone around him. Don't touch me, Harry gasped, his eyes flickering between white, green, and red. I'm losing the containment, the pressure, it's too high. You have to let it go, Harry. She cried. The veil. You told me the veil is the anchor. Use it. Harry looked at her, and for a fleeting second, the white room in his mind was clear. He saw the girl who had been his only variable, the only thing that made the cold architecture of his life feel like a home. I'm sorry, Hermione, Harry whispered. The equation, it finally balances. Harry looked toward the ministry. He could feel the veil in the death chamber, 300 miles away, responding to his frequency. It was a sympathetic resonance. The hole in the world was calling its firstborn. Harry didn't use a portkey. He converted his entire physical mass into a stream of F-tachyon particles, a theoretical, long jump, the unspeakables had only ever simulated on paper. In a flash of light that was seen as far away as London, Harry Potter vanished from Hogwarts. He reappeared in the death chamber. The room was empty, the unspeakables having fled the building during the ministry's collapse. The veil was fluttering violently, a roar like 1,000 oceans filling the chamber. Harry stood before the archway. He was barely human now, just a silhouette of violet fire and black smoke. You've won, Harry Potter, the collective voice of Voldemort whispered in his mind, now sounding tired and defeated. We are one. We go into the dark together. No, Harry said, I'm the containment unit, and the containment unit is going to be disposed of. Harry stepped onto the dais. He felt the cold of the veil, the absolute, perfect silence he had been searching for since he was a child in the dark. It felt like coming home. He reached into his chest and pulled. He wasn't pulling out his heart. He was pulling out the entire subsystem, the combined, compressed soul of Tom Riddle. It looked like a pulsing, black sun. This is the end of the line, Tom, Harry said. He hurled the black sun into the veil. The archway groaned, the tattered curtain nearly being ripped off its anchors as it swallowed the Dark Lord's remains. The screaming in Harry's head stopped. For the first time in his life, it was quiet. But Harry was fading. The energy required to hold the shards had burned out his biological core. He looked at his hands, they were turning into silver dust, drifting toward the veil. He sat down on the cold stone of the dais. He felt the weight of the world lifting. He had done it. The mission was accomplished. The variables were solved. He closed his eyes, ready to let the dust of his body be swallowed by the dark. Not today. Subject 7. Harry's eyes snapped open. Saul Croaker was standing at the edge of the chamber. He wasn't holding a wand, he was holding a small, glowing orb, a soul anchor. The same technology used for the time turners. The mission isn't over, Harry, Croaker said, his voice cracking with an emotion he had suppressed for years. Why? Oh, you don't get to quit just because the job is hard. Croaker smashed the orb on the floor. A wave of golden light flooded the room, fighting the pull of the veil. It wrapped around Harry's fading form, knitting the silver dust back into flesh and bone. The violet circuits on his skin dimmed, settling into a permanent, silvered lattice of scars. Harry gasped, his lungs suddenly filling with air, real, cold, London air. He fell forward, coughing, his body solid once again. Why? Harry rasped, looking up at Croaker. I was ready. It was perfect. Because, Croaker said, walking over and offering a hand. The world is still broken, Harry, and for the first time in 10 years, the department doesn't have a plan. We need a director, someone who knows the dark better than we do. Harry looked at Croaker's hand. He looked at the veil, which had settled back into a quiet, rhythmic flutter. He felt the silence in his head, and the strength in his new, reforged body. He took Croaker's hand and stood up. I'm not a director, Saul, Harry said. His eyes were green again, bright, piercing emerald, but they still held the depth of the abyss. And I'm not a weapon. Then what are you? Harry looked toward the exit, his mind already mapping out the next phase of the world. I'm the one who watches the Watchers, Harry said. And I've got a lot of work to do. As they walked out of the death chamber, the lights in the ministry began to flicker back on. The weapon had survived the blast, and the world was about to find out what happens when the shadow stops hiding and starts leading. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Protocols of the New Dawn. The director's office atop the Ministry of Magic had been transformed. Gone were the plush carpets and gold-leafed portraits of the Fudge era. In the IR place was a cathedral of reinforced carbon polymer and smart glass that flickered with a constant stream of global magical data. Harry sat behind a desk carved from a single block of obsidian. He wasn't wearing the robes of a minister. He wore a high-collared, black tactical suit that shimmered with the same light-absorbing properties as the department's specialized gear. The silver lattice of scars on his hands hummed with a soft, bioluminescent glow whenever he tapped the desk, a rhythmic, sub-audible pulse that kept the building's internal wards synchronized to his heartbeat. The Wizengamot is calling it a coup, Saul Croaker said, leaning against the doorframe. He looked older, but the weight on his shoulders had shifted from guilt to a weary kind of respect. Let them call it a weather pattern if they like, Harry replied, his voice a calm, focused resonance. Names don't change the physics of power. The ministry was a failing system, a collection of outdated variables. I've simply initiated a hard reboot. In the school, Harry's fingers paused over a holographic projection of Hogwarts. The school is under the variable protection protocol. Dumbledore remains as headmaster, but the curriculum is being audited. No more children being raised as sheep for slaughter. They will learn the architecture of magic, not just the rhymes. We begin teaching sensory expansion in the 3rd year. The door hissed open. Hermione Granger walked in, her pace brisk, clutching a tablet of digital parchment. She stopped 3 feet from the desk, her eyes scanning Harry with a mixture of academic fascination and lingering grief. She was one of the few who still remembered the boy before the void. The new education bill is ready for your signature, she said, her voice professional but softened at the edges. But we have a problem in the London Underground. A residual pocket of the White Room energy has leaked into the No-Maj tunnels. People are seeing things. Distortions in the light. Harry stood up. He didn't move toward the door, he simply appeared beside her. The space between points A and B was a suggestion he no longer felt the need to follow. I'll handle the containment personally, Harry said. Hermione, stay with Croaker. Start the recruitment for the Watchers program. I want the sharpest minds from every house. No blood purity metrics, just high-density magical potential. She looked at him, searching for a trace of the 11-year-old she had met on a train. Are you ever going to go back to being just Harry? Harry looked out the window at the London skyline. He saw the threads of magic and technology beginning to weave together, a future he was forcing into existence through sheer will. The boy was a draft, Hermione, Harry said softly. This is the final version. Harry stepped through a rift in the air and appeared in the damp, dark tunnels of the underground. The air was thick with the ozone scent of the void. A group of commuters stood frozen, their eyes fixed on a shimmering tear in reality where the ghosts of the past were trying to claw their way back in. Harry raised his hand. The silver scars on his arm flared with white fire. Data is never truly deleted, Harry whispered to the rift. But it can be archived. He reached into the tear and closed his fist. The void energy didn't fight him, it recognized its master. The rift collapsed into a single, glowing point of light before vanishing. The commuters blinked, their memories of the event being gently re-coded into a mundane electrical fault. He stood in the silence of the tunnel for a moment. He felt the world, its billions of lives, its messy emotions, its chaotic beauty. He was no longer the weapon aimed at the heart of the dark, he was the shield that kept the dark at bay. He tapped the communication lattice behind his ear. Saul, the leak is sealed. Understood, Director. What's the next move? Harry looked up through the layers of earth and stone, high. Vision piercing through the ceiling of the world. The equation is finally balanced, Saul, Harry said. Now, let's see if we can make it grow. The end. Harry Potter was never meant to be a symbol. He was meant to be an answer. An answer to death, to prophecy, to the lies of the ministry and the fear of gods and men alike. If you enjoyed this dark alternate fate of Harry Potter, subscribe to Potter Nexus for more forbidden what-ifs from the wizarding world. Because some stories were never meant to stay hidden.